We are proud individuals.
Sunriser, good evening.
Living for the
Misanthrope is here.
But the flames couldn't go.
Blackbird, good to see you. All right. Barefoot.
God
all right.
And religion to paint us with salvation.
Give it a couple of minutes.
But no one.
Setting up the panel as everybody's coming in. Sunriser, how are you? Lanaya? Did I get that right? Good evening. Philly Philosophical, love that. Great name, great name. Alice, hello. Barefoot, how are you? Howdy, Alice. Yes, perfect. All right, I'll take that as a win for tonight. What is going on?
Hello, my friends. How are you? Can you hear me?
And Linnea is here too. All right.
Can you hear me?
Let's
Professor?
see who else is trickling in, who is supposed to be on the panel. Give it a couple of minutes.
Professor, can you hear me? Professor.
Well, of course, when Ginge pops in, everything is fixed. That's how we roll in here. You know that.
Well, right now it's breaking. You can't hear me. Can you hear me?
I cannot hear you.
The
Drew
Drummer can. Everybody, chat can hear me. You can't.
I can.
What'd you do?
You know, there's this thing called faders.
Yeah, that thing again.
That thing.
Do I need to run you through the school of AE?
You know, just about. I mean, the problem is I'm operating this with my left, which is usually a bad sign. Left, nothing works. The only reason why I have a left is so that my watch doesn't fall out. That's it.
So multi-handed multitasking and audio engineering. I need to just school you on all of that then.
It's sort of trying to read the comment section while moving a fader. You know, that's like more than this monkey can do. Why are we here?
Honey, I have done that drunk off my damn face and singing a song. So like you can move a fader. That's
oh, dude, if I sing, we're gonna have negative audience here. Oh, Rob is here. All right.
Hello. What do you think of my backward writing?
Oh,
isn't that gorgeous?
Awesome.
Isn't that just?
that is brilliant. All right, Rob is
a woman
invited.
of many talents.
Why are we here? Soul, did you just accidentally fall into this? Because if yes, we can talk about that. Otherwise, the topic du jour is probably going to be, I think to some degree, what the hell happened yesterday? And how are we going to somehow...
Fuckery.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? And this time I'm recording breakfast. Hello. Subscribed.
Hi,
right.
steak and breakfast.
This time I'm recording the audio separately.
Oh, okay, good.
So I've learned from last time. My 2 cents is worth at least.
Hey, unicorn.
I appreciate that. Posted my letter to Buddy Carter. Okay. We do have a couple of people still on the invite list. Let me try Rob again. He was supposed to be on the panel, so I'll send him another invite. Rob, if you can see the invite, please do join us.
So we are going to have a new format tonight, guys and dolls, and she's, theys, thems, and gays, and everybody. Yeah. So we have 4, as they can be here, 4 what we're calling comms mods, and they are there to talk and pull from the chat, tell you how to get good questions and ideas to me. I am here to represent you guys, and this gentleman over here will be moderating the panel. We still have our normal mods like Gen X Dad and Watch Bar to make sure there's no riffraff among the chat. But can we do better? A Druid drummer Morgan and Desmoid are our comms mods tonight. So, yeah, they'll be periodically telling you how to get my attention and how I can represent you guys to the panel and volley your questions over to everybody.
Yeah, Linnea, actually, I think you started off the right way anyway. Why is Zeitgeist host of an invite?
By the way,
I don't know.
Rob.
Good question.
Hi.
How are you? Rob, thank you for coming on. It's been overdue.
Yes.
Thanks for the invite.
So, Rob and I think, connect on a very peculiar subject, which is how we were connected. And Rob is, I would call, much more of an expert at it than I could ever be. And that is the Seven Mountain Mandate, which led me down the path of which is now my first pinned post. Then ended up in Project Blitz. But can you just give us a quick little, like a primer as to what are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, Seven Mountains, how do you summarize that quickly? There's this idea within some of the evangelical circles that society can be described as 7 spheres of influence. And some guys back in the 1970s had a prophecy that they all supposedly had at the same time. And God told them that if they take control of the 7 spheres of influence, which includes things like education and government and arts and entertainment, when that happens, then the second coming will occur. And the second coming can't occur until those 7 spheres of influence are taken over by Christians.
Yep.
Which
So
the discrepancy, I would say, starts with a couple of guys, 3 namely, had the same epiphany, the same delivery from God, which is a reductionist version of the Bible at the same time, and then happens to magically meet to compare notes and come up with what now is the Seven Mountain Mandate. Did I get this correct?
Yeah, they all had a dream, supposedly all at the same time, and they all lived in different parts of the country. And somehow, I think it was some evangelical conference, they all met and started exchanging notes and discovered that they had all had the same dream at the same time.
If anybody is buying that,
I call shenanigans. I call shenanigans.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
So, in other words, the people who want to bring about the end of the world are the ones running the world. Yay!
They're trying to, and they are heavily influencing the world. Yes.
Scott, was it a wet dream?
Yes.
You know, considering the subject matter and the people that believe in this particular subject, I would say it probably was as close to as possible.
Yeah.
But
they were probably very excited about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, what a coincidence. But we're also not just stopping at the Seven Mountain Mandate, right? I mean, the Seven Mountain Mandate, I do have a little bit of a clip of Wallnow in there, but in its own contradiction, but it goes further than that. It's not just the Seven Mountain Mandate. That is just the Christian perspective that provides an angle of reductionist Bible thumping, if you will. But what's more dangerous, and this is something I lucked into just by accident, going further down the rabbit hole, is the Project Blitz. And before we dive into that, Ginge.
Rock and Roll Express is having issues with the Linktree download. I just wanted to bring that to your attention, Professor, to kind of bookmark and reconnect after the live.
Yeah, I did hear from a couple of people that there are some Linktree issues. I will fix that as soon as we're done with the live and probably convert the form letter to a Google Doc and just throw a Google Drive together and just change the link. So give me about 20, 30 minutes past the live to wrap up and then get that done.
Be Kind is also recording for us in case somebody is too naughty on the live.
Yes, absolutely. Let me just change headphones real quick. I sound atrocious. Rob, Project Blitz.
Yes, Project Blitz, that's whenever we were connecting about this, I explained that's how I got my start into investigations about this, and this has been 11 years ago. And I got started with Project Blitz before it became Project Blitz. It started as something called the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation, and that was kind of a evangelical version of ALEC, where they're writing model legislation. It is no coincidence if anyone's ever noticed that all at the same time, all across the country, there are hundreds of bills being proposed in state legislators. that all are some variation of the same topic. That's no coincidence. It's either ALEC, if that has something to do with like economics, or it's going to be providing tax cuts to the wealthy, or if it's something spiritual, religious related, then it's probably coming from some organization connected to Project Blitz. So as people got wise to what the Congressional Prayer Caucus was doing in writing all this model legislation, they ended up rebranding. And this is something I think my friend Melissa is watching too. But she has recognized this pattern where as soon as they start being discovered, they'll start reinventing themselves. They'll double down on whatever it is they're doing, and they'll reinvent in order to try to hide it. And that's kind of what happened with Project Blitz. Project Blitz's mission is still the same. They just renamed it.
So the premise of Project Blitz, if I remember this correctly, it was summarized. It was presented in the 150 pages, and the 150 pages contained 20 model bills. And what struck me as by surprise, is that some of the legislation carries that language. And that legislation was predominantly introduced by people on the Prayer Caucus. So there is a direct connection to the Project Blitz and then upwards going into the Seven Mountain Mandate. That was one of the actual connection pieces that I was looking for. Surprised that I found it, but here we are. So the question is, of course, what are we going to do with all this? And this is also where Ash comes in. Welcome to the panel. At this point, Ash is somewhat notorious, being handed around in the international media circus. How you doing, Miss NPR?
Mm-hmm.
I went out and
you're having horrible audio.
Yes.
Okay, hold on.
Rob, meet Ash. Ash, meet Rob, in case you have not met yet.
Hi, Ash.
Hi.
Ash is what I would consider, or who I would consider, a research fiend.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to find it,
absolutely,
Ash will find it. All right, we
Hello.
have Ali coming on as well. Ali, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Again,
There we go. Yay. Nice to see you guys.
Look at that beautiful face. Hi.
Ali, we meet again. Good to see you.
Yes, nice to see you. All the Christian nationalists are taking over in Temecula. We need your help, you guys. I have friends down there, and it's getting crazy right now in Cali. But,
Really?
We don't have Christian nationalism in California because we're a totally blue state, just so everyone knows.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about that?
I would love to talk
right.
about it. I want to support them, and I think I have a feeling all these groups, they act like they're local, but they're all getting, super supported nationally. That's what I've learned. Any of these groups, if you talk about it enough, you find connections, and obviously they have a history of white supremacy down in Temecula. I think it's the KKK capital of California, I hear, but they are getting, they have a church that's very active, and they got Moms for Liberty candidates, took over the school board last December. Students have been organizing down there, and they are now targeting the kids and doxing them on Facebook and calling them like children of Satan and stuff. And literally, I think last night they did a anti-CRT info session. All of the panelists were paid $50,000 to do all of them are anti-CRT. All of them say that they don't believe in systemic racism. So parents showed up, students showed up to tell them that, and it got explosive. There was a Black man who spoke up in the meeting saying that he didn't appreciate that they were spending tax dollars on this, that they were making it feel unsafe for Black and LGBTQ and Native American and Latinx students. And a woman told him to leave the country. And
I saw that.
And then they said, then they escorted the Black man out. And the woman who said that
I saw that
was fine. And there's also, I don't know, I've been sharing on my account some folks who are, I think, associated with insurrection. The church itself has associations with 3%ers and insurrectionists and stuff like that. So We're going to be doing a live on Sunday, but I'm encouraging folks to follow their accounts because they've been, making things public, and they do need support in amplifying this outside of the bubble. So
let me bring this back to Rob for just a hot second. The outcome of what we're experiencing right now with CRT, the straight-on attack on CRT, on educational principles, the singling out of particular groups. I have not yet read through the entire 150 pages of essentially the Blitz document. Are there traces of what we're experiencing right now in that Blitz document as far as legislation and communication is concerned?
I actually haven't seen a recent Project Blitz playbook. They discovered and found 6 of them, which that started back in like the 2015 timeframe. Back during that timeframe, though, if you remember, whenever all the displaying "In God We Trust," the national motto,
yes.
Bills that were passed, that was straight out of Project Blitz. That came from Blitz. Yeah. So they've been targeting education for a while. The CRT outrage, that originated in Heritage. Christopher Rufo was the one who invented, that entire thing, which Heritage is connected to all of this as an umbrella organization through things like the Council for National Policy and Paul Weyrich, honestly. I mean, he was the originator of all of this back in the early 1970s.
Yeah, and I mean, Rufo is sitting on the board of New College right now, right? And I mean, it's not going to get any better. Ginge, question.
A point of clarification for Ali. The question came from a Druid drummer. Did you say that the woman was fine or that the woman was fined?
With the woman that said leave the country. She was so there's basically Black students have been organizing walkouts. They are currently getting targeted on social media. So there's accounts on Facebook and then also on this Instagram where they have it's TV USD We the Parents group, and it's like nobody knows who's behind the account, but they're basically taking screenshots from the social media of the other accounts and posting them on their account with their names and stuff like that. So in a way to kind of dox students and let people know kind of who to go after. And recently, because of it blew up because they had this meeting, and a Black resident was saying, like, I don't appreciate this. This is kind of BS. I don't like this, and basically was yelled at by a woman in the audience. She said, leave the country. And then they escorted the man out of the room, which doesn't make any sense because he didn't do anything to justify that. And it got escalated because like there was a kid and I reposted this video, but a kid was like saying, he should be able to say what he wants. And there's, some white supremacist dudes like, engaging with students in a way that is not safe. And so there's a pastor there. He's Pastor Bryant. I also connected with him. He's a Black pastor, and I think they were thinking they could engage with him, as a Black man, but as a religious leader to speak up. And he's actually now also working with the parents to defend Black students. So
that's wonderful. While I've got your attention, Ali, would you send me that signal information through this account? You've got my my alt. So, but also to the chat as your representative. I want to make sure I get all of your questions, but we're very, very early in this live. So if what can we do? How can we deal with this? Save those for the end or message me after. There's a lot of really good questions I'm seeing, but right now to moderate you guys, because you all have amazing ideas and amazing interaction, amazing engagement. Let's keep it to the topics currently spoken on. So if I need to jump in, I can do that. And I'm not responding to you directly to say, stick a pin in it. Okay. I promise you have my full and absolute attention, but don't overwhelm me with stuff that may get answered later on. Trust the process, trust the panel.
Oh, for sure. But there's also somebody who I was, almost desperately waiting for to come on the panel. Digital Sister.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes, we can.
Hi.
Hey,
Can you just take a hot second and introduce yourself to everyone and what your specialty is, because you come locked and loaded.
I do come locked and loaded, so I'm hoping. I'm sorry that was a little bit late. I was trying to finish up another event. But yes, my name is Shireen Mitchell. You can find me everywhere under the name Digital Sister. I'm the original Digital Sister because I formed the first organization to get women and girls of color online into tech back in 1999. What I do now is stop online violence.
Why 1K?
Well before 2000K. Digital divide arguments. We are in a whole different era at this point. But currently what I do is what you see behind me is focus on a couple of things to simple detox, stop digital
We can't see
suppression.
you.
We can't see you, love.
Click the button so we can see you. Yay! Okay,
Yay!
good.
Oh,
now we can see you.
Save. I had to hit the save button. I have not done live before, y'all, so forgive me.
Yay!
This is your
This
first
is your first live?
Welcome.
This is my actual first live.
Yay!
That's I would want to say that's a privilege. Thank you so
It
much.
is a
for saying
privilege.
that. With that, I'll leave you to it. I'm gonna leave my job here is done.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I had to hit the save button. So please forgive me because I thought I was speaking. I saw my face and I was just like, I'm just talking. So the place that we are now is the organization I have is currently Stop Online Violence Against Women. And we have been tracking the ways in which mis and disinformation impacts the community, particularly Black women, but the community as a whole, and the ways in which it's been used to for political purposes, but also to harm communities in a way that I think what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh no!
it was her first live. Hopefully, soon to be her second live.
Yeah.
Ash, let me bring you in real quick. Everything that you just heard got quite an emotional reaction out of you. May I just, for one, ask why? For two, what is interesting for you, particularly about everything that Digital Sister just said?
I love witnessing Black women empower other Black women and people. I love it. I love it. Diversity matters.
Oh, 1,000%. And that's why particularly Ali actually pointed out Digital Sister. So thank you very much for making that connection for us. And hopefully she's going to come back because we need to definitely talk more about it.
She's in the
We need to
chat.
invite her back.
Okay.
She back? Can you get her back? Or
It's all you. She's knocking at the door with a request.
she's knocking at the door. She hasn't knocked on my door yet.
Oh well.
Okay, you guys continue on. I'm going to look for Cherie.
I saw
agree with
someone
you,
in the
Ash.
comments that said something about, going back to Temecula really quick, there were brown hats. I don't know anything about them or anything like that, that they said contact them.
Well, so if you go to
ignoring
my
what I saw.
account, I've been sharing their accounts, and I've also been, there's 3 creators that you can tag. Brandy Kikoa, there's a Rachel, and then Dorothea Gale, but all of them are in my account. And also you can go to Defense of Democracy in California, because they're also active with them as well.
Okay.
We had Defense of Democracy in the chat last time, but I was unfamiliar with them. Next time they come in, we definitely want to make room for them. And now Digital Sister is back to the second
Yay.
live. Welcome. You're now a seasoned pro.
I don't know how to invite myself back, but I will work it out.
That's okay. We got you.
But thank you so much for having me. So the second thing I was saying was that Stop Online Violence Against Women started in 2013 as we started to see this ongoing online harassment pattern, and we've been tracking it ever since. So it's now 2023. As of January, it's been 10 years of us tracking these online harassment patterns, particularly those that target women, particularly Black women, but overall, the ways in which I think people now understand how foreign actions happen, but also how domestic actions happen too. And we've been sort of tracking it for the last 10 years and gathering the data and putting out reports just to kind of give a sense of like what people are experiencing with mis and disinformation. Unfortunately, in America, we have accepted a certain pattern of mis and disinformation, and we're calling it free speech. And we are definitely having a hard time trying to counter it and address it, because we are fine with, you saw the TikTok hearing, we're fine with calling out foreign actors. We're not okay with calling out domestic actors. And that is obvious. So how do we solve this problem when we have people who are our neighbors participating in this, trying to take over school boards, putting laws in place, and using mis and disinformation to justify people voting or putting those things in place?
I have a question for you, if it's okay, because I think, Cambridge Analytica, some people do know who they are, or vaguely, and now we have Yonder. And I don't think people understand the kinds of activity that the current folks who are involved in social media, these...
You went silent.
Oh, you're muted.
All of a sudden, you muted.
Sorry, I don't think folks understand what they are doing currently. Okay, all right. Come back to me. I'll come back in.
It's because
my kids. We can hear you.
You don't understand what other people are doing currently.
So like Yonder, there's Twitter, Elon, like all those folks. Yeah.
Is that the question?
I think that was the question.
Okay. Yes. So, for example, when we saw aspects of the Twitter files being kind of released, right? And there was a hearing about that. This is a perfect example, right? The question now becomes, the most average American is going, well, isn't that real information being offered to us for us to dissect ourselves? The problem is it was only released to certain journalists, right? Like what happened with WikiLeaks. Remember, it's the same playbook. When the Russians did it, they hacked information, they gave it to WikiLeaks, and then it became a public discourse on Twitter and other places. The exact same pattern, I don't think people realize, it happened with the Twitter files, except it's domestic. Someone from Twitter only gave that information to specific journalists, and then only those journalists reported out on it. No other journalists were able to have access to those files. They were not able to dissect those files, thousands and thousands of files. And then those same journalists went before Congress and said, here's our interpretation. So Congress is asking, how much of that did you actually sort through all of it? Or how much of that is what was told to you? And you picked out the pieces that was told to you. And that's where the difference lies. This is not about free press. It's not about free speech. It means that if all of those resources were there, why aren't we able to see all of it? And why are we only able to see a piece of it? And if we're only seeing a piece of it, and that the pieces that we are being presented are selective pieces for us to consume, we should all be having questions. Because the reality is that the only thing that went out was the things that made Twitter look good, i.e. the new owner, not the organization as a whole, but the new owner right now. And if you witness the hearing before that hearing of the journalists, I'm doing journalists in quotes because I just don't classify them as journalists, where the staff members actually testified, what they testified about was drastically different than those journalists. They talked about their experience. They talked about the things that they were forced to remove.
Allie will be right back.
Okay. The concept that that those testimonies that were done in such a way before the journalists went into way more details about the practices. And those are the hearings we should be paying attention to, not the Twitter files. It is literally the epitome of the WikiLeaks. And we know now that not only were they participating with Russian interference in that regard, claiming to be journalists too, but we also know he had to be extradited because of all the other things that he's done in a false way, right? People are assuming that it's about his journalistic integrity. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with his other actions, and people not having a nuanced way of separating those things is the key to this conversation. We are in a really struggling position in this country because even in this instance, they're journalists we can't trust.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's definitely proved that.
That's what makes this hard.
Correct.
I think Ash was revving her engine, unless you were knocking on the door.
Yes, in sign language.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yes. I have 3 questions or 3 comments, Shireen. One is Shane Morris says hi. He's in the chat.
Yes, he's here. And checking himself out, of course, because Shane.
Let me jump in here real quick. Unfortunately, TikTok does not afford me the opportunity to invite 9 people onto the panel. So I know that Coyote Annie is here, and I am reasonably heartbroken that I can't get you on the panel right now. If you can hang with us for just a little bit, we'll see if we can rotate out maybe as time goes on.
I can step out for a bit while you guys keep talking, and I can pop back in. So I can pop
awesome.
out and just
Thank you, Ali.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll get Coyote Annie up here.
Real quick, on behalf of the chat, to the chat, if I just tag you back on a question and say pin, put a pin in that, see if we answer the question later, keep me from having to write too much down, and see if we get around to that question and avoid me having to address it. Again, love you guys in the chat. You're always so amazing and productive down there. Hi, Annie, my fellow, former now, but my Oklahomie down there.
Yay!
Well, at least fellow ginger. Let's just put that on there, right?
Well,
there we
true,
go.
But I mean, I'm a former Oklahomie, and she's an Oklahomie, so that's actually how we crossed paths. I was watching her news on what was going on in Oklahoma and affecting my friends. So back when she was with the Church of Prismatic Light.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's loop back to Ash. Ash, you had 3 questions for Shireen.
Yes. Well, 2 questions and a comment. My first question is, because you have been doing this digital advocacy for so long and research and looking at the trends, is it okay? Can you hear me better now? What is the pattern that you notice? Oh my gosh, I'm so sunburnt. What is the pattern that you notice with disinformation? And the second question is, as a white woman, what is the best way that I can advocate for people of color without centering myself?
The first is the pattern that I think most of us are experiencing is the way that woke is being used for policy.
Okay.
Almost everything you hear from media to any other place in between has to now be countered. Woke is AAVE. It is, I think, I know Allie's not up here, so she knows this, but there's a video pinned on my TikTok where I define it and explain how this is a version of a new Jim Crow. It is sort of the anti-civil rights era legal narrative. They're writing laws based on our identity. And don't get me wrong, I understand that other people are being affected, so I'm not discounting that. But the origination of using woke is based on our liberation, right? Wake up, see the injustices that are happening in this country. We were the ones sounding out the alarms. Even though that is true, we're watching the way in which those laws are being written in different ways. And here's the thing I want to say, and this is the tough part, so please forgive me because I know some people might get offended with what I'm about to say. The 1557 bill in Florida that they call Don't Say Gay is not a Don't Say Gay bill. That is not written in the bill. They keep using it. Listen to what they say. The bill doesn't say don't say gay. Why y'all keep saying that? The bill does not say don't say gay. The bill actually says that children have no autonomy. Children have no autonomy. That their parents have more autonomy over any child. That certain parents have more autonomy over other parents. That political ideology is equal to an immutable right. Do you know what an immutable right is? Yes or no?
Can you explain the definition?
Immutable rights means the things that we are born with, right? The things that allows us the protections from the government with EEOC and other things, those ideologies in that regard, is equal to someone's political affiliation. Be clear. You can change your political affiliation. I can't change being Black. Can I lighten my skin? Yep. But not changing Blackness. Mm-hmm. And they're saying that someone's political ideology about my existence is equal to my existence. That's what's written in that law. And it's not the only law that has that there. So I get really uncomfortable when we're like, reduce it down to like this one single thing. That's not it, y'all. They are actually saying that someone's idea about us is equal to our lived existence in law.
Yeah. Man, it's bullshit.
So all of our identities is equal to someone's thoughts about our identities.
Based off your own lived experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's purely anecdotal too. Like, it's
not fact. No. But once it's written into law, the practice of using it changes everything.
Exactly.
So when we move from using woke as some random ideology that we're just like disagreeing about people's opinions and this, that, and the other thing, and it's about free speech, we are in a different movement when we are into the place of a written law. And that's when we move into Jim Crow. So the mis and disinformation about woke has now been weaponized into accepting a written law in multiple states.
And among the things that I have heard from the Black and African American community, particularly with one news anchor, was that one of the motivations behind this path is that by 2045, the white majority, statistically, is no longer going to be the majority. So maybe that is one of the underpinnings. It may also be informed through essentially what we see in Project Blitz, as well as in Seven Mountains. You are muted. I can't hear you. Sorry, can't hear you. Turn your mic back up. Talk to me.
So,
is there something to it, or is this just
say that
way
one
too
more time?
surface level?
No. So the surface level is having people who are not used to laws being used against them now, realizing laws are being used against them, right? But the laws have always been used against us.
Always.
And we have had to try to survive. What does that mean?
Oh, it's for him.
What does that mean? Oh, okay. I'm trying to capture.
we have a whole new process here.
Okay, I got it. So the problem that we're having is we are now living in the moment where certain people realize how the laws are being used against them, right? And wasn't used to watching written laws targeting groups of people. Now, remember, we did this before in this country. Like there were Negro laws, right? Those words were written.
The Black
now
Code.
We're watching that they're listing out all our identities. They're not just writing Negro anymore, right? They're writing every identity. And now we have a different conversation happening because they are writing those identities as well as someone's political affiliation. Religion was always included, so just make sure that that's not missed, right? But what's different is that we are now basically saying that one religion gets to have more say over other people's religion, right? While saying religious freedom. We're saying religious freedom, but we're practicing a single religion based on the law, right? Perfect example. The other is white identity. Can I say that? Oh my goodness. Am I going to get in trouble?
No, you're fine.
No.
You should be fine.
Yes, you can
Okay.
say
You should be
that.
fine.
Roll ahead.
White identity has not been written into any law, right? If you think about it, every law that has existed has been trying to give other people rights for equivalent identity. White was never written into the law. White isn't even written to the law now. Right? So think about what I'm saying. It still gives them the right to do whatever they want because they are not written. We are written. Those with gender identities are written. Right? Sexual orientation, written. Religion, written, despite how we deal with it. It's being written in a way that still does not identify white people who clearly have the rights that these laws do not apply to. And I think sometimes people miss that part because that's not written in there. They say race, but we know what they mean when they say race.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not, we all know, like the race that we're talking about is the groups that are the most marginalized. We're not talking about the groups that, right, that don't have to deal with the laws in any one of those ways. And that distinct difference is important. So when I speak about mis and disinformation, it's like having the example, I'm sorry, this recent example happened that I thought about a lot. The movie White Women Talking came out. I said White Women Talking. That's not the name of the movie. It's called Women Talking.
Oh, I haven't watched that. It's in my watch list.
It just got an Oscar. It just got an Oscar. Are there any other women there? There are no other women outside of white women. So even the concept of a movie, which is a part of the media narrative, when you see just white women, it gets accepted as default women. There's no other women there. And those are the narratives, I think, that what you're asking me, Ash, is what I'm talking about. If we can't identify the mis and disinformation that is literally targeting one group and exonerating another, we're having a hard time solving this problem. I called it White Women Talking on purpose because as my skin looks at that movie, I don't see anybody that reflects me. Do you? Did you? Was there Asian women there? Was it Native women there? But the title of the movie is Women Talking. You are telling the rest of the world, even in that moment, that women means white. We're not included.
Ooh, not something that I would have ever caught on to. For one, obviously I haven't seen the movie, but I think it is so pervasive that most of us have just internalized the status quo and we just don't pay any attention to it, which is also, I think, where I'm attaching to what Ash said, in a sense that, short of saying I am here to learn and to listen and to understand, that just seems woefully inefficient. So we need to do obviously something more. And this is a question I want to come back to. Let's jump up to Ginge real quick with an audience question.
A few things I want to address in the comments section. Hold on, let me find you real quick. Scott something or other. Final warning, bud. I'm not digging your vibe. I don't think you're here in good faith. Someone else also asked about, and I can't remember who it was. So sorry, it's been a minute. But no, Digital Sista is not saying that in Florida, LGBTQ are not being attacked. This is an intersectional issue. It is everybody who is not cishet white Christian men. And let's not forget, the biggest pioneers of human rights revolution are Black trans women and Black LGBTQIA+, and especially Black cis women. So there is a lot to cover, and we are going to use some shortened language as we address some of this. And another point I want to address from the chat is please listen to learn, not to respond. I really want to give you a lot of attention in that chat, and there's a couple of problematic folks, and I get your earnest and zeal, but let's keep things on topic. When you're tagging me, please, I have a lot to pay attention to, and
yes,
I want to make sure you're represented, and that I can get to those questions.
Also, quick shout out.
I wish I had that power.
Go ahead. No, quick shout out to the moderators. The moderators on the back end those are the guys that keep our back safe, that allow this live to actually take place without getting kicked off the air. So once again, the mod team, send them some love. And
so Smiley,
thanks so
can I
much for being
just say,
here.
I appreciate you responding to that. The only way that you can respond to me that way is if you're telling me that LGBTQIA people are not Black.
Exactly.
The only way you can respond to me like that is if you're telling me that women aren't also Black. The only way you can respond to me that way is saying that there are not Black queer women. The only way you can respond to me that way is saying that when I speak, I cannot represent any other group but a Black woman that you see on this screen. That any of my other identities does not matter to you. By the way, my identities are not equal to many others. I am still saying, as a woman, as a Black woman, that you are telling me when I talk about the Black community, I am not encompassing the Black Christian, the Black Muslim, the Black Jewish person. That somehow my voice is only the thing that you see. That when I talk about religion, I'm not talking about religion across the board. The problem that we're having in this conversation is that when I speak, you sing a single version of the conversation, and that version is Black. All the other identities that even white people encompass does not include me or my community. I do not accept that.
What's the path through this? Because the singular representation, which we are so easily generalizing, right? So I've talked to one Black person, therefore I understand the Black experience. Nothing could be further from the truth. How do we, and the word ally comes so easily these days, which of course is, I think, it's a misnomer in many respects. But how do we actually step up to the degree that we are getting closer to being one? We never will be, because there's just too much history, but we gotta at least get closer. And Annie, haven't even heard your beautiful voice yet. Let's start with you.
Hey, so I don't know everybody's names on here, so I see you as Digital. My name's Annie, and I recently saw a video of a young Black woman, and she was saying that every white person is a racist, and pretty much all of TikTok came for her in droves, so much that she had to remove the video. I responded to her video saying that instead of reacting, people need to listen, because the system of oppression that's in place, she's right. If you aren't actively fighting against the system of white supremacy that's in place, your silence is endorsing it. And I think a lot of time that when white people hear any criticism towards white behavior, they get offensive. They say, no, I'm one of the good white people, me right here. I wouldn't do that. I'm not one of them. Yes, you are, because you benefit from the system of oppression that's in place. So I'll give you a quick example from my own life. I have a friend named Sade, and she lives in Chickasha. I live in Midwest City, and I have to drive to go pick her up to go hang out in the city. Well, when we drive through a town called Blanchard, that's a sundown town, and she has to duck down her seat so that we don't get pulled over by the police, because if she is sitting up straight 100% of the time, we will get pulled over. And that's an example of how I benefit personally from the oppression of Black individuals. So anyways, my point is that instead of getting offended about when Black content creators talk about issues with white supremacy, instead of taking that personally, you should reflect on that, because it takes a lot of work to undo the scientific biases that each and every one of us has. So that's all I wanted to contribute.
I second all of that.
So my one response to this is this. The reason that white people have such a hard time is because they have to decouple themselves from whiteness, but they've lived as white. So the pain point that you're going through as we talk about white supremacy, which some people think is off in the distance, right? It's like this thing over here, I'm still the good white person. I can't possibly do anything wrong because I'm genuinely trying to do the right thing. But there's two things happening. One is, as a Black American, technically I'm coming from a Black cultural perspective, African cultural perspective. I am not going to decouple myself from Blackness, because it's a whole culture. It's a whole Black American culture. I cannot decouple myself from that. It's because that culture exists against the oppression of white supremacy. Sometimes when I say that, white people go, so then why should I decouple myself from whiteness? Because that is oppression. Decouple yourself from being ethnic, i.e. Irish, Jewish, Scandinavian. Say those. We're not asking you to decouple from that. We're asking you to decouple from the white supremacy part, which is the whiteness part. And you see them as the same thing. It's not. We had to build an American culture here because we were stripped. What we have is an American culture. It's drastically different. And somehow people see them as equally the same. They are not. I hope I said it right so that people don't get too offended, because I can't see all the chats. But if you understand, okay.
As a white person, a little further along than some of the friends of ours there in the chat, I just want to say whiteness is nothing to be proud of. But the fact that I am Irish descended, and I look into that history, I look into what my family went through for me to be here, and to find pride in that, not this white skin, but the music that comes from my ancestors, the dance that comes from my ancestors. When you decouple from whiteness and regain, and some of the followers down there are mutuals of all of ours, and they have seen my series this month with regards to Irish American Heritage Month. And I'm that rebellious Irish descendant. I'm bringing that language back that was taken away. I'm bringing back that music that was taken away from my culture in exchange for privilege in this country. I just wanted to say that as a white person representing, and say, reconnect to what you are and what was taken from you in lieu of whiteness.
Go ahead, Annie.
Okay. One more thing I wanted to say is that if you are not standing with the BIPOC community, you are going to fall with them 100%. You cannot take rights away and dignity away from one group of Americans without every American falling behind. We would not have pride in the LGBT community if it was not for the hard work of Black trans women. Intersectionality is a must. It is a necessary, and it is going to take you not only uncoupling from white identity, but integrating in with the BIPOC community. You should be following BIPOC creators. You should be reading BIPOC material, because integrating yourself into their culture, you have to be educated about that, or you're not going to be able to fight for anything. So.
Have y'all read a poem by Nikki Giovanni?
Writing it down.
Nikki Giovanni, I ate a hot omelet. Oh my gosh, that poem is amazing. It really is. It's so good. It's so good. I want to give one example. Yes, I want to give one example of something I experienced, and then I don't mind hopping off and letting Allie come back in, because I really appreciate your education right now. Shireen, it's amazing. I made a video. Somebody was talking. It was about coffee and racism, and it was a white lady, and she was making all these comments. And a quick internet search tells me the history of how coffee was brought into our country and things like that. And there was a Black woman in my comments. She was from Africa, and she was like angry, and she, was like, I didn't want her to. I felt like I wasn't trying to center myself. And she was saying some stuff, and another person I don't know was like, shut up. Why are you coming after Ashley? And I said, and this is that moment, y'all. This is the tipping point, okay? Carolyn Bryant, tipping point. I said, even though her words were like, ow, but like, it's fine. I said, it's okay. OP, the lady, she has every right to say what she has to say. I'll hold a space for it. And y'all, the conversation shifted. This woman, I was in my notes app copying and pasting all of these resources she was giving me and all these different people to listen to. And it just opened up a dialogue, but it could have went south real quick had I been like, yeah, the audacity of her to blah, 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 blah. As a white woman, there have been so many times when I've been doing this type of work, those words sting, and I think that it's not me, it's not personal. It is this system with which we are in, and if I can do my best to hold a space for someone else's pain or hurt, then hopefully we can begin to heal. And that's why I asked you the question about how can I continue to do this work, because I'm out in the world, and as a white woman, I hear things, right? I hear and see all kinds of things, and I can get into certain places other people can't. How do I continue this work without centering myself?
I think this is the toughest question that I think most white people have, especially white women, because I think that on average, most don't see themselves as being violent in their actions, right? They just think that they are acting. They don't think their words are violent in their actions. They think they're just saying what's coming to mind, right? I think that this is one of the most difficult parts of this. So when a situation is happening, I was in, I'm on Clubhouse most of the time at different points. And I was in a room today where we were going over the reading of Race Trader. I'm forgetting the author's name right now, so I have to go back and find it. But having white people try to handle being called a race traitor by decoupling themselves from whiteness is really challenging, right? And that's the piece. So when you are asked to not center yourself, you also have to make sure that the setting that you're in, if someone says you're not welcome, accept not being welcomed. Say, I get it.
Okay.
Tell me when to come back if I can. Mm-hmm. That's first. Conversations that become intra-community debates, give support, but don't speak for anyone, because then it becomes this really complicated space. Speak up in support, but don't speak for. And I think that one is probably the hardest, because people don't know the difference between speaking for versus speaking up, right? Having support, giving someone back, making sure that you're sharing their content, elevating their voice, you're pushing them up, not yourself. So when people say don't center yourself, don't try to take over the narrative. Even if you want to, even I've seen people on TikTok go, hey, I'm not trying to speak for Black women, but here's my take on this comment from a white woman. I think this is problematic. Here's my commentary about that. Please, my fellow allies, Black women, please add to this. And if they add to it, i.e. video or i.e. comments, elevate the comments. Do another video that goes, hey, this woman said this. Here's where I think I might have gone wrong, or here's where I think it's perfect that what she was trying to say in comparison to what I was saying. Perfect examples. That's just the social media perspective. In real life, the struggle is different. Like in the real world, sometimes you're so used to hearing things that it's literal public degradation of Black women, and you don't even know what you're hearing because you're used to hearing it, right? Commentaries about single moms, right? You're used to hearing that, aren't you? How do you accept public degradation of Black single moms when those women came from an ancestry where they were forced to have up to 27 babies for white economic profit? Mm-hmm. How can we have a conversation right now about abortion laws without realizing that they used the 1825 law from Missouri as the beginning point to say why Roe should not exist? Because Roe only existed for 50 years, but 1825, that abortion law, which is forcing Black women to give birth for property for white people, that was more of a precedent. Example about abortion laws is the perfect example of like white women centering themselves right now is problematic. The law they used was the law for us. Handmaid's Tale was using our story and centering white women. We have to stop accepting those versions of the story, because Handmaid's Tale was America.
Yep.
Gilead does not exist. Yeah. America exists. So
quick question.
Okay.
From the chat, it was asked that you clarify race traitor.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a book. Sorry.
Well, the term itself.
So, okay. So the term itself is usually used on average towards white people about supporting Black people or other minority groups, but specifically Black people. It's analogous to the N-word, L.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say it, but you know what I'm saying, right? N-word, L.
Yeah.
Right?
We got
right?
You. We got
okay. You. That you would support another group of people that don't like your kind. And that's where the term race traitor comes from. It also
comes anti-white.
Huh?
It's anti-white. Like I've been called race traitor plenty of times over my journey, and I take it as a point of pride, but it means you're anti-whiteness. And one person could take it as, well, when it's addressed to a white person, I know that there are other instances of race traitor used. I will not address those. But I take it as a point of pride personally. That means I'm doing something right. I'm helping other people and not perpetuating a system of white supremacist culture. It's a good thing to be a white race traitor.
Among the many things
just really quickly, it's Noel Garvey. I can never say the last name right, so please forgive me. But Ignative, so IGNATIEV.
Okay.
For anyone, and I'll try to put it in the chat later so that they can actually go. But the concept of this was based on the concept that if you aligned yourselves with those who were oppressed, those who were being used by the system, that you were you were seen as one of us instead of one of you, right? So the Mississippi Burning movie, perfect example. Those two white men died with a black man, but the concept was that they dared, two men dared to protect that black guy, right? So they were seen as equal to him. What were they doing at the time? Trying to get the people in the South to be able to vote. They weren't trying to harm anybody. They were just trying to make sure people had the right to vote. So when we are in a system where the system is built on certain things, like if Jim Crow was the law and black people are not supposed to be able to vote, and then white people try to help those black people to vote, immediately they are classified as a race traitor, which also means all of your privileges are revoked.
So among the, I would say, minimum expectations that we should have, particularly with moderated spaces such as this one, which is predominantly white, would be to have a shared collaborative space, not with the expectation that we are constantly asking for advice, but to at least have an opportunity to have broad experiences shared in a platform that is otherwise associated with one skin color. And this is something that when I peruse, if you will, the lives, I mostly see what you would find in sort of tribalism, that particular people bound together. I think we need to break that habit. That would probably be a first step, not an exhaustive step, but a first step. And I think that step would hopefully allow us a little bit broader education, particularly as we're whitewashing education, as we see in Florida. But to that degree, I want to bring in Annie and Rob real quick. The idea of whitewashing education. Annie, I know that you have researched the 7 Mountain Mandate of late. I know that Rob has obviously. Go ahead.
I don't mind popping off. That's okay.
Allie's knocking.
Ash, if you can go down, this would be great. But I still want to hear what Rob's perspective is.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Ash, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's what I get for only having
Ash,
9
thank you for
slots.
all your questions. I hope I answered them properly. I always am nervous about the way I try to. Okay, thank you.
Ash is phenomenal. You gotta follow each other. Ash is doing some amazing work, as do you, obviously.
Yes, I'll follow you.
Where was I going with this? Well, obviously, shared spaces, communal spaces that allow the full range of experiences. But what I'm wondering about particularly is the idea of whitewashing education, whitewashing history. What do we see as far as trajectory is concerned in the 7 Mountain Mandate, in the Blitz principles that essentially run us into what we're experiencing right now, which is full-on legislation of whiteness. And the legislation of whiteness is where the danger really lies. I mean, we can come together communally until we're blue in the face, the only color that I suppose is accepted. But when we legislate certain groups out of existence, we're running back to 1933 at 200 miles an hour. So what are we seeing in the 7 Mountains, in the Blitz principles? Are we anchored there? And is that why we're seeing this?
So let's talk about these secret groups. Before I do, I want to say one quick thing to what's your real name, Digital?
2 things. My actual name is Digital Sister. I don't know why people only see Digital, but I am the original Digital Sister. But my first name is Shireen.
Shireen. Okay. Miss Shireen, I got to tell you this before we dive into the organization thing. You mentioned The Handmaid's Tale, and I saw it mentioned in the comments a lot. And let me tell you why I hate that comparison to the struggles of the BIPOC community. Anytime we are talking about abortion and these draconian laws being passed on women, The Handmaid's Tale gets brought up. which is about women being forcibly impregnated and their children being taken away and being put in a subservient role. That is literally the history of Black women in this country. So we are overlooking the real life struggle of Black women, and we are equating what's happening today with a fictional novel. So I just want to put out my dislike very much for that comparison. Okay, now the organizations. All right, let me get comfortable. Okay. So the Civil War happened, all right? Civil War happens. We don't do anything to these traitors. We don't hang them in the town square. They don't get punished. So the Civil War never really ended, let's be honest. And the church, the Baptists split in the decision of who supported slavery and who didn't. And so we got the birth of this group called the Southern Baptists. I am mentioning the Southern Baptists because they are at the...
No, Southern, you got to do the whole name. Southern Baptist Convention.
Yes, and also I'm going to say real quick, I am the least qualified person on this panel. So I have no credentials. I'm just some mom. But yes, the Southern Baptist Convention.
I'm just a European.
Yes. Okay, so in the 60s, they eliminated prayer in school. And at this point, the Southern Baptist Convention decides we're going to plot to get into politics. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the 80s with Jerry Falwell, who was a Southern Baptist televangelist. He and this guy named Paul Weyrich, and his name is going to come up again and again and again, Paul Weyrich. They start an organization called the Moral Majority. You probably heard them in the 80s, okay? The Moral Majority.
About the Moral Majority.
The Moral Majority is a group that became the Council for National Policy. They evolved into the CNP. They are rooted in dominionist theology. And before we go any further, I'm going to give a quick rundown of dominionist theology. Dominionist theology is what the Seven Mountains Mandate is. They believe that Christians should have control of 7 areas of human life. That's government, school, education, family, all of it. And so they are adamantly anti-LGBT. They were founded by Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell were both pro-segregation, so it is rooted in racism. They are anti-abortion. They are for women being subservient. They are scary. They've even called for public executions by stoning. So this dominionist ideology is the undercurrent of the Moral Majority and the Council for National Policy. So the Council for National Policy, guys, this is the group that branches off into all of these other secret organizations. And I do mean secret because these people in the Council for National Policy are forbidden from even mentioning its name. They hold 3 conferences in the United States a year, and the locations are kept secret from the public. Some of the branches that this organization has branched off in other words, Paul Weyrich, the founder, also founded the Heritage Foundation, the American Legislation Exchange Council, which is called ALEC, and on their board of directors, they have the founder of ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom. So ALEC is a bill modeling group that's rooted in this Christian dominionism. And they have on their, what ALEC is, sorry, I'm getting, it's a lot. Listen, ALEC is a group of bill model writers, and they have members of these Christian dominionists, but they also have corporations. So like Exxon, Coca-Cola was in on it for a little bit. ADF is a group of law and law programs that their goal is to train future legislators to install a Christian theocracy. They have a program called the Blackstone Legal Fellowship that Amy Coney Barrett, one of our Supreme Justices, was a speaker at on 9 different occasions. Okay, so that's ADF. And then you have the Heritage Foundation, which everybody knows about the Heritage Foundation. They're a group that lobbies politicians to pass bills that promote this Christian theocracy. The reason that this is such a problem, 1 is the secrecy, but 2, once again, they are founded with segregation ideologies. They are built on white supremacy. The picture, if you have like the Ku Klux Klan And the CNP, it's the same picture.
Triple K.
Oh,
You
sorry.
can't say the full name. Sorry.
Sorry. If you have
Triple
the
K.
white hoods and CNP, it's the same picture. Okay. These people are goose stepping straight into our legislation. And that's why what you said earlier struck me so well, that we have to stand with the BIPOC community, because a lot of these laws, they originate in racism. Yes, they are attacking the LGBT community. They're attacking women's rights, but it started and it was built upon segregation and the being pro-slavery. All of the hateful legislation started groundwork with anti-Black. I don't know the right word for it. They were anti-Black. So just
they're called Black codes.
Yes.
Before we go to Ali, Paul, how much does Blitz tie into this? Is there a connection? Because personally, as far as I'm concerned, with all the religious perspective, the one that worries me most is Blitz. Or am I off track?
Is what?
Project Blitz.
Were you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's connected. It's supported. Like they have ALEC. Within all of these umbrellas, Blitz does the same thing, but from a more religious perspective. So they're directly related, and there's a lot of crossover, between the membership of the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation, which is what Project Blitz is founded in, and within CNP and within Heritage, and the New Apostolic Reformation. We have to mention that as an umbrella organization as well. There's so much crossover intersections across those groups that they're directly supporting each other.
Can I jump in on that?
Jump away. Okay,
so I really appreciate Coyote Annie. Annie? Is that your? Can I call you Annie? I love what you said, how you laid it out. What I've been seeing is that this is actually then replicating, this kind of larger structure is replicating on the local level. So you have lawyers, you have media, you have fake grassroots, which is we call AstroTurf, and you have politicians. And those so I start looking for those things everywhere I go. And so in San Francisco, we had a school board recall. I was targeted. All of a sudden, we had these neighborhood groups showing up and these moms groups, and they were highly organized and getting tons of members, and nobody knew where they were getting money from. And then we also had neighborhood groups, and they cared about San Francisco and crime and fentanyl. And you may have heard a lot of stuff about San Francisco having just being dangerous and crazy. We had some also local media that showed up. The SF Standard showed up. And then another organization, the Marina Times. As we find out, both of them are funded by billionaires, right? At a time when investigative journalism is dying, they're doing investigative journalism on the ground, and they're basically amplifying a lot of troll and social media accounts. And we also had tons of lawyers. As a district, we were constantly getting sued, FOIA requests, Brown Act requests, and lawyers were involved in trying to stall our progress in implementing some of these progressive educational policies. But some of them are connected nationally. And what we started seeing is people there are consortiums of I guess they're like brokers. They match plaintiffs with conservative lawyers, and they file lawsuits. And sometimes they know that they're completely fraudulent, but if they file a lawsuit, then it provides fodder for them to then put something in the news. And so they have this little ecosystem. It's almost like theater, the way that they're running things right now. They will start a fire, and they're all, it's kind of like what Annie said, this idea that, it looks like there are a whole bunch of organizations, but if you drill down, a lot of, there might be one person that starts 5 organizations, or they're all on each other's boards, or, and so I think that's where it becomes really challenging, is because people feel like there's a lot of different organizations and there's a lot of organic activity, when in reality, it's really a small group of folks that are directing a lot of activity. They have a lot of money, and they're basically paying people to enact these activities in a way that looks voluntary, like volunteers or moms showing up, and really they're communication professionals, lawyers, and these think tank kind of nonprofits are also a way that they're engaging in a lot of this activity, because they can donate a lot of money to a lot of different nonprofits, and like the Heritage Foundation is maybe, like they can function in those ways. And they're doing it, as I said, on a national level. You have Moms for Liberty and things like that, but they're also creating little 501c3s locally. And so I think people need to start looking around and saying, like, which organizations have popped up to talk about parents' rights, and kind of drill down and say, like, where are they getting their money? Because most parents don't have money to just start 501c3s. That's not how I've been a parent volunteer for like 25 years. You never have money. And I don't have like a PR person, and I don't get like automatically onto the Tucker Carlson show. But that's basically what's now happening. And it is because of this infrastructure that's been built over the past, I'd say, 40 years.
You mentioned news outlets. So one thing that's interesting is on the Council for National Policy, Charlie Kirk is there, and so is the entirety of Turning Point USA and Breitbart News. Yes, they keep it complicated on purpose, but on each of these hateful groups, you're going to find two donors, which are the Koch brothers Foundation and the DeVos family, and they are behind almost every single group as far as funding it.
And the Bradley Foundation is another one Bradley Foundation.
Bradley Foundation.
Yeah, Bradley, yeah.
But so I guess my question is, there are places, so how do we connect the dots? Because what was crazy to me was finding out that some of the same people who are targeting us in San Francisco are also they're also very active in North Virginia, Fairfax County and Loudoun County, Virginia, and they helped Glenn Youngkin get elected. And so we started sharing notes and realizing the very same accounts. Independent Women's Forum is another group that's very active. They're like anti-feminist feminists. And, they basically, I also wanted to add, white supremacy is a problem, but they're in a way, they're recruiting people that are not white to now enact this, a lot of these policies, because people aren't very sophisticated. So we have Nick Fuentes, we have Andy No, we have people that, and they're recruiting women to fight equal rights legislation. And so I think that's where we need to be better at, working with one another and kind of educating people on the activities that people are engaged in, because they basically, like when you think about Kanye and Candace Owens, I mean, they're basically being supported by this right-wing machine to basically undermine Black voices. And so anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
I can make a suggestion there, because what I found is that it's not necessarily so much about connecting the dots. I think we can assume the dots are already connected. I think the more useful thing, and through conversations that you and I have had, you can look at what's going on in Northern California. You can look at what's going on in Northern Virginia. You can look at what's going on in Colorado, because I'm experiencing the same thing. It's the pattern. It's the cookie cutter, the press that happens, because just like you've seen people of color, and it's very strange, it's very jarring the first time that you see them, standing up, making themselves known, being very proud of being associated, with these things. We're like, how exactly did this happen? But then you find the same thing in Northern Virginia and Northern California. So I think that's I think we could assume that all of this is connected. All of this is being managed in a centralized way, and then just start teaching people to recognize the pattern.
I think that's
if you see, like in Colorado, Heritage Foundation during the summer of 2020 into 2021, they had this national tour that was called Save Our Schools. And they were going around to all of these places. Colorado Springs was one of them. I'm sure that California and other places happened. And they would come in and they would train people on how to stand up these parents groups. But I believe that there was some kind of a delay that was built into this too. They would say, don't do this right now. Do this in 3 months, because about 2 or 3 months after Save Our Schools tour came through Colorado Springs, we have 3 pop up focused on 3 local school districts. That same pattern is happening all over the United States, with the exception of the red states. There's no reason to do this in Arkansas. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has got this handled, through legislation, right? No reason to repeat that pattern. But in the places where it's going to be difficult, where they need to gain ground, they just repeat the same pattern over and over and over again. I think we need to teach people to recognize that pattern.
I'm going to jump in real quick, and I want to say that these groups also are involved in everything. And let me give you an example of the TikTok ban, if I could for a moment. So when we look on the outside, we say, oh, they just want to ban TikTok. But we watched the hearing and it was bipartisan. And one thing I noticed is that one of the congressmen mentioned the Heritage Foundation during the hearing. So why is the Heritage Foundation involved in the TikTok ban? Why are they connecting the two? And it's because they want to repeal Section 230 of the Digital Communications Act.
The famous 26 words.
Yes. And so let me tell you guys why this is important. If 230 was repealed, then let me just explain for the audience, because I know you guys already know. Okay, so what 230 does, Section 230, is it prevents companies from being sued for what creators post. So if you have a Discord server, you cannot be sued right now for something that somebody says on your chat. If you are a big tech company like Instagram or TikTok, you cannot be sued for the content that creators post. However, if it was repealed, you could. What does this have to do with the Heritage Foundation? Because it's an attack on freedom of speech. And without Section 230, George Floyd, his video would have never made the rounds. We probably wouldn't have even seen the rise of Black Lives Matter. And ACLU actually wrote an article about this. So they agree with this. The communications about abortion, trans rights, LGBT rights, BIPOC rights, all of that would be shut down by big companies who don't want to spend the money on excessive moderation. Why do they want to stop us from talking to each other? Why do they want to put a ban on freedom of speech? Well, that's fascism 101. And when we talk about things like the Seven Mountains Mandate and we talk about the CNP, that is the goal. They want a Christian theocracy that is rooted in fascism.
And before we jump back to Rob, when you look at the tenets of fascism, we are really only missing two positions anymore, one of which is the total control of media. And the second position is to actually truly essentially throw out election results. Now, we've tried the election results. Thankfully, so far, we still have a modicum of validity embedded, but we are seeing the full-on attack on media, independent media. And 230 factors right into that, which makes perfect sense, because as soon as the entity is connected to the post of the individual, then the entity has a vested interest in protecting their back and their shareholders. And there we go with the downfall of anything that is freedom of communication and exchange of ideas. Rob, I rudely interrupted you, I think, earlier.
I don't know. I was finished. I was playing off of, like, Ali had this conversation before, gotcha. And it's part of, like, what it is that we can do. The people that are aware of these things, it gets overwhelming with how embedded, how deep the networks go, how long this has been going on, and how do you convey that to people, and recognizing the pattern is incredibly important.
Yeah, I just saw more B Harper pop up in the chat, and Shireen, I know you were waiting for a hot second. Pop it over to you.
So yeah, I mean, I think the patterns and the timelines are important. Like, patterns is one thing, timelines is also another piece. Finding out whether or not these organizations are connected to others. Like, Stephen Miller alone is a part of several organizations that have been participating in all these things. The last one that went after the Georgia vote, basically challenging Georgia voters in certain counties. I think that organization, if I got this right, it's called True the Vote. It was a national entity that came in and used a Georgia law that said that any Georgian can challenge their neighbor's ability to vote. So the law exists that a neighbor can challenge another neighbor about their ability to vote. What they did was they used that law to go after whole counties. So it's not just the conversation we're having about the school boards and everything else. It's about that piece as well. How do these bills get put into place is because the people who are voting, some of which are being pushed out, i.e. Jim Crow, that they are not having the ability to vote to change any of these laws. What happened in Jackson, Mississippi, what we're dealing with now, they're trying to instate a whole new system on top of the Black county. Tennessee tried to do the same thing. America isn't just looking at just these random things. It isn't, and I think in Texas, I forget what county it is now. I don't know if it's Harris County, because Harris County is one of the ones that always pops up. But like all of the Democratic people who were voted on the school board, the governor kicked off. People voted for them and they got kicked off. Like, if we aren't understanding the pattern of voting, keeping people from being able to vote, and then even in those instances, kicking out the people who got voted in, that's a key to another pattern. And that's fascism all by itself. Like, I don't even want to get into details about what that means.
Digital, I have a question for you. Did you see in Florida that they're trying to pass a bill that would eliminate all of the sororities for people of color?
They would remove, like, are you talking about the Democratic Party, or are you talking about something
else?
No,
DeSantis put forth a bill that they're going to be voting on soon, and it would eliminate not only Jewish studies, Black studies, women's studies, gender studies, but completely eliminate. And here's the big one: all of the BIPOC fraternities and sororities.
Yes. Yep.
So can I jump in on that?
But that also goes on the heels of now reviewing tenure, which makes things even worse because now everybody is on a chopping block. And if you know how academia runs, for one, there is a ton of talent and very few positions. And those who are actually making it into tenure, I mean, hats off to you. This is an endless process. Getting your tenure reviewed and potentially withdrawn puts you basically out on the street. And that is how they are going to unfortunately succeed, by eradicating majors and entire sections of education.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, jump in and then we'll go up to Ginger.
Okay, so I wanted to say, so I talked with Dr. Isaac Kamala. He studies dark money, and he basically explained this Koch donor network. They started out in the 60s because they did not like what was the college protests that were happening with the Vietnam War and things like that. And they realized that they weren't going to be able to just pay off legislators to get things done. They needed to generate a narrative. And in order to do that, they were going to produce political ideas like widgets. And they were going to do that by buying professors and researchers to come up with kind of bogus studies. And they set up this whole infrastructure to basically promote ideas that they wanted to promote from the university level that then they could sell, but they would also target university professors that were doing research on stuff like climate change that they did not want people talking about, because Koch is oil money, right? They don't want research coming out talking about climate change. And so that's why Philip Morris is also involved in a lot of this. And so universities and just the idea of questioning and critical thinking is a threat to them in terms of their business motives. And so it's not even about Christian nationalism. For some folks, they're just looking at wanting to be able to deregulate everything and be able to kind of not be questioned and not be challenged by, workers and, stuff like that. So they're targeting the universities. They set up this whole, system, and they're now going after the K-12 system. And what they've realized is that they can, by claiming something harms kids, they can then go after people in a really violent way, because I'll do anything to protect my kids, right? And so they found this theater is a place where they can kind of wage war on democracy. So it's much more than just, even academic freedom or the ability to think and question things. And it is all connected to voter rights. And school boards as well are also connected to political power, because in San Francisco, the mayor wanted, we are voted on. And the mayor started talking about how she wanted us to open the school district before we were ready to open. We did not have vaccines. We didn't have things like that. She was feeling a lot of pressure, and she was trying to force us to open, but we were separate because we had autonomy. And so there was conversation happening about how can we maybe make the school board something that she could appoint like they do in other cities. And they figured it wasn't salient politically, but what they ended up doing was doing the recall. And by recalling us, then she could appoint us. So in a way, it was also a voter issue, because they disenfranchised voters who voted for us by doing a recall, which was a low voter turnout election. They were able to, all the affluent people and like the moneyed interests, many of whom don't even send their kids to public school, were able to then replace us. And we're school board members. We were just educators. They don't want educators to be there. They want political pawns who will then eventually kind of move up the ranks, because people who start out in school boards end up on city councils, and then they gradually, move up the ranks. So they're trying to purge school boards, because that's also a place where you have educated folks, you have voters, you have true volunteers. They want to put their people in those spots, and they want to disenfranchise voters from being able to elect folks that are actually, public servants.
I want to say just one quick thing about why are these big companies tied into these Christian nationalists? And I explained earlier about Christian dominionism. Well, the thing is that they're trying to actively bring forth the end of times. They want to bring forth, by putting Christian nationalists in every part of U.S. life policy, they want to bring forth the second coming of Christ. They want to bring forth the end of times. So if you're a company that is destroying the planet, it is in your best interest to align with people that don't care if the planet survives. So they make a lot of money, and they end up supporting these radical policies.
Which also gets to say that the Christian nationalism does certainly not include the LGBTQ and the BIPOC community. Ginge.
Okay, I have a lot to address. So if I forget something.
Stage is yours. Go for it.
All right. So Irish Lass, I'm going to send you over to videos like his, anything I've shared with regards to dealing with really shit representatives. And that is, call them and tell them I will support your primary election opposition. Threaten their security. But you're going to be seeing over the course of the next few days, as we have been seeing in the last 24-ish hour, 30 hours since the congressional hearing with the TikTok CEO. You're going to see a lot of different ideas with how to deal with politicians that are being obstinate, and how to not use the appeal to emotion, but appeal to that pocketbook and to their power. Also, a couple of other things I want to discuss because of what I saw in the chat. Yes, I keep seeing this comment that Florida is the template. It is not. Right now, it is the most successful attempts. We are seeing different methodologies and different path priority from the Seven Mountain Mandate in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee. Florida is just getting a lot of attention because I feel like it's a wee bit of a look at the birdie. We're not seeing the failed attempts. We're seeing the legal fascism that DeSantis is putting into place, and he's working the system to his own end. There are other states to pay attention to, like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Tennessee, where we are seeing haphazard attempts at this, at different focuses and different priorities and different paths to the same thing, that the Seven Mountain Mandate. So don't focus solely on Florida. Don't focus solely on fascist fart Führer DeSantis. Pay attention to Abbott. Pay attention to the Huckabeest. Pay attention to Governor Shit in Oklahoma.
And Glenn Youngkin.
I thought Mary Fallon was bad. I didn't think we could get worse than that woman.
Hey, don't get that live banned again, would you please? I would like to
I'm
download
sorry.
this time.
That's why
Rob.
I didn't. Have I said any cuss words yet? I don't know. I said fart.
It's like punctuation for you. Rob, go ahead, please.
I was going to continue with that, with realizing how long this game has been played. The Roe versus Wade, overturning, decision like last year, that was 50 years in the making. So this isn't like any one state. This is not Florida. This is not Arkansas. I mean, to your point, this is national. It just so happens that we have 50 states that have separate governments that they have to address each individually. Their goal is a Christo-fascist theocracy for the United States, period. So wherever it's occurring, you are exactly right. There is no template. They want the whole thing, and they will do whatever it is that they can in order to take that and achieve that goal. And just be very afraid and pay attention that they were willing to wait 50 years in order to make abortion illegal. They are patient. It's all set up. Sorry, Allie.
No, I wanted to add to that because it's also what I realized is, Northern California and Northern Virginia, they're using San Francisco as a dog whistle. So when you want to look at the kind of history of, how do you motivate people? I was talking with Shireen actually about this. People, somebody in the comments had said, propaganda is always partially true, right? You take a kernel of truth and you attach a lie to it, but you also have to have like a mindset that is going to be receptive to it. So if I said I can fly, people wouldn't even take that as, anything real. But if you say something that people kind of believe, or they're not even aware that they believe, and in the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about racial bias, about Black women, and this idea that a Black woman can't represent women, right? Those are things people don't even question. And so when I was targeted as aggressive. My colleague who's Latina was targeted as incompetent. And I'm seeing friends of mine in Northern Virginia, if they're men or if they're standing up for trans youth, they're being called groomers. And so these are, I think what they're doing is creating, like in San Francisco, we have a lot of apathetic white liberals who are not active because they're like, oh, well, it's just happening in Florida. Good thing I live in San Francisco. And I'm thinking, yeah, but the Bay Area billionaires like David Sachs and Elon Musk, they're funding DeSantis. In fact, David Sachs had a big fundraiser in San Francisco, and we have more billionaires in San Francisco than anywhere else. So where do you think our money is going? It's going to other states where they can push this legislation and then expand it, and then they're using us as a dog whistle. So in a way, it's like we need to be aware of what's going on across, nationally. We need to be aware of what's happening, but also, like Chris Rufo, he's tweeting about San Francisco Unified, and he has a blog post saying that we're secretly turning kids trans, which is a total lie. But people in Virginia, they can't check that. And they already have an idea, like San Francisco. What's that like? If anybody, is homophobic, they already have crazy ideas about what happens here. And so they basically build their narratives around people's biases. And so we have to do better about checking in on each other. And also, I should care about Virginia in San Francisco. And, we need to be sharing information and calling it out. So,
Allie, I want to expand on what you and Rob said for just 1 second. One of the reasons that we shouldn't focus on Florida is that DeSantis is sacrificing Florida. In our current political climate, he knows that a lot of these bills are going to be blocked by judges. They're going to be stopped in federal courts. He knows that. He is sacrificing Florida, losing Disney, losing businesses, to campaign. Florida, him doing all these stuff that he knows is not going to fly. It's to show voters across the nation what he could do as president. It's all campaign tactics. So when we see Florida, we need to say, oh, well, that stuff's getting turned down. Hooray. Well, that's not why he's doing it. He's doing it because this is the stuff they want on a national level. And with gerrymandering and with suppression, they will get it unless we show up, not just for the big elections, but for the small ones too.
Real quick from the chat. The question posed, and I've seen different iterations, is why Dems are just cannot seem to get the wins. Why is it that we can't use the same tactics that we see the right using? And it's a very simple explanation. It is the fact that we have to be better than who and what we're dealing with. First and foremost, because they will beat us with experience. If we sink that low, they will flat out beat us with experience. Secondly, we have to play by the rules. We have to make sure that every move we make to fight fascism, until it gets to a certain point, I'm going to quote Patrick Swayze here, we have to be nice until it's time to not be nice. And we will all know when that point is. But until that point, we have to play by the rules. Otherwise, the movement gets derailed. Black women have been telling us this for 50, 100 years. Black trans people, we have to take note of the leaders that have been down in the trenches for the last 100 years before us white folks ever got involved. And we have to take their lead and listen to them as leaders and remind ourselves that, yes, it sucks to be the good guy. We have to play by the rules. But in doing so, we make sure that there is nothing compromised in our efforts. There is integrity.
I want to add something, if that's okay, because I've seen this where, number one, as a Black woman, if I express anger or rage or things like that, like I get targeted.
That's true.
And so it's not helpful to me. I mean, you get trained at a very early age, like how to express yourself, and you get your communication is policed and all that. And I think that what's happening in Temecula is people are in Southern California is we've got Proud Boys showing up to school board meetings, and they're trying to bait people into arguments so that they can do theater and then post it online and say, see, they're just like that. They're just as crazy, like Antifa's crazy and all that stuff. And so people need to be very wary of the fact that this is political theater in a large sense. And on the local level, they are actively trying to get people to react in ways that are human. Like, you get mad when people are yelling at you or saying really horrible things, but if they can get you yelling at them or screaming at them, then that goes directly on social media. It gets on Tucker Carlson. It gets into their, right-wing media ecosystem. And so it's like, Martin Luther King Jr., when you're talking about, how they were marching in nonviolent ways. I personally don't know how he feels about violence. What I believe he knew was that if they dressed in their Sunday best and they had signs that said, I am a man, and they showed up in spaces and they did not respond when they were fire hosed, when they were attacked by dogs. The way that plays on the media is it made the cops and all these, supremacy folks look bad. But if they had responded, then none of their marching would have been effective. And so I just want folks to kind of think about that. And, we have to represent ourselves in a way that we can't have our anger or frustration be weaponized against our efforts.
Allie,
I want to jump off at I need to jump off that because I am the resident Proud Boy specialist here. One of their degrees of being a Proud Boy is literally to incite a fight in the name of the movement. And they will do that. And also this is addressing questions in the comments. If we do not play by the rules, if we play into their hands, whether it be Proud Boys, a lot of them have, I think it's the third or fourth. I'd have to look it up. I don't have my reference sheet here. But the third or fourth degree of being a Proud Boy is to start a fight in the name of the movement against specifically leftists and anti-fascists. So we, as several people in the chat, we still have to hold ourselves to a higher behavioral code. Sorry, I got my mom voice on. We have to be, yes, Blackbird, we have to be above reproach. Yes, ma'am.
Celtic.
I want to throw it over to Rob real quick. Hang on a second. Rob's been trying to get in here for a hot minute. Rob.
No. I was going to use that as an example of the pattern. This is the agitators are part of this like repeatable pattern. And while in California and like other places, you may see Proud Boys, in Colorado and Michigan, you're going to see FEC United and the United American Defense Force. They do the same thing, like for the same purposes. And then we've watched, how Moms for Liberty and these other supposed grassroots organizations are working with those types of organizations on purpose. That is part of the pattern that people need to recognize. If you see Proud Boys, if you see FEC United, then Moms for Liberty is probably close by. They work together hand in hand. It's part of this, repeatable pattern.
I'm going to jump in. And I'm going to try to not end up on a watch list, but I'm going to be the dissenting voice.
On a few.
It's probably too late.
I'm the dissenting voice here. Okay. All right. So you mentioned Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King said that a riot was the voice of the unheard. And I know that it's not etiquette to say violence is the answer and that they could use it against us, but we're past that. I mean, I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and do unnecessary harm. But at this point, I would call it self-defense in certain situations. If we had not seen the riots in Black Lives Matter, it wouldn't have got the attention that it got. If we had not had riots at Stonewall, we would not have the modern LGBT movement. So there is a time and a place to pick up bricks.
But I'm
just never when they're planted. Never when they're planted.
Well,
let's go to Shireen next, because she's been trying for quite a while, and I definitely want to hear what's coming from Shireen, please.
Thank you. I think we have to be careful with this one. I'm just gonna Annie. I understand what you're saying, and it actually depends. There's like a depend part of this. Let's be clear. MLK asked for nonviolence, but America is mad not at the person who had hot coffee poured over the top of their head and they didn't move or do anything. They're angry with the person who basically said, don't pour that hot coffee over my head. I'm going to stop you. Right? There is a sentiment about that. And I need that to sit into some people's brains, because the reason why MLK asked it to happen to that way was to put Black bodies in violent positions. And some of my community does not like that. Like, we were being put into violent positions, and white people were mad, not at the people who sat there and took the burning coffee. They were angry at the person who said, I'm not letting you pour that on me.
Absolutely.
I need people to hear that part.
You know,
that said, hold on a second, Annie. That said, what I also want to bring forth is that the setting matters. If you're in the South, you may not live. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, there's context to parts of this conversation, right? Even speaking up, being loud, can turn something completely upside down. A young woman in North Carolina, in a sundown town, bought land, bought a bus, tried to, use her money to create her business and own land, and she was targeted. The sheriff was like, oh, this is normal. Right? That protection is not granted to all of us. Just, I need to say that, because I do get where you're going. But yes, that protection is not granted to all of us. The last thing I'm going to say is this. When people, the disinformation and misinformation part of this is when people compare BLM to January 6th. That's the place you have to stop people from making that comparison. Because much of what BLM was about, by the way, 90% peaceful, there was also bad actors, like we know has always existed when Black people rise up. That there was Boogaloo Boys who killed a cop. There was the Umbrella Man who basically was banging on windows. It was the cops, that is video proof, that was actually knocking out windows in other places. It's not that we don't have a problem with this conversation. It's the problem of perception. Because if broken windows happen, by the way, there's a whole broken window theory out there that people need to go do a little bit of research on. But when broken windows happen, the assumption is that we are destroying property, because our lives is not more important than property. You know why? Because
capitalism.
No, because we have always been property. Stocks and bonds. Our lives over buildings. Livestock and bonds. We keep saying it. We keep repeating it. We were livestock. So when people don't understand the narrative of, like, we are still in some people's minds seen as property, that they have ownership over us, we should not have ownership over land or buildings. And that is more important than our lives. And if people can't catch the narrative of that, that's why we're having this disconnect. Because we are still defending ourselves about being seen like everybody else. Because we are still considered not people who should own property, not people who should own land, not people who should make money, but still seen as subservient to white America.
And I just want to add, like,
one more quick thing.
Yeah.
The reason why this is so difficult is because the minute we defend ourselves, we are seen as the problem. Mm-hmm. When we defend ourselves, which is, I agree with you. That's why I want to talk back, Annie, to what you said. It is self-defense. But if we defend ourselves, we are seen as the bad guy. The people harming us, nobody's going after them. There was a video, I think, Allie, I think came from the CRT panel where a grown man went after a child, a black child. Nobody saw fit to stop the man.
Except for a black man.
But then a black man gets up there and they make it look like he's the bad guy protecting a black child. That white man was going after a child. Mm-hmm. And we are having a problem with having that distinction. Until we can get past that mis and disinformation about that distinction, we are in this really weird spot.
We got to get past it. We absolutely have to get past it. I want to say just one thing, and I'm going to hand the floor over to Allie. And when we were talking about the Black Lives Matter riots, even though 90% of it was peaceful, they were still labeled as aggressors. And so I think of France right now. Like right now, France is trying to raise the retirement level from 62 to 64. And for the past 10 days, France has been on fire. France, today, they had their dump truck drivers go and pour 10 days of trash in front of their elected leaders' houses.
Yes, they did.
So
it was lovely.
I do hear that we need, because one thing that we have a bigger issue with in France is that division among racial lines, the history of oppression against Black people, which makes, protesting in that way a lot more dangerous for that community. But the way things are going, I think that maybe we could take a page out of France's book. That's all I'm saying.
We can't. I wish we could. We can't. The setup that the French have with 5 weeks of vacation, with a history of coming together and fighting a variety of issues, which are usually issues that are presented in, I would almost say, singularity. They do have access to social health care in case something happens when they go out and protest. They have conditions that allow them to come together and actually make their voices heard. We don't have those conditions in the United States. We have on average 10 days of vacation. That is even provided by the graciousness of the employer, right? Same goes for healthcare. We do not have the conditions that allow us to come together, besides the geographic, of course, just ginormousness of the United States in and of itself. So those conditions are out the door. The other thing, and I think that is the one thing that we are all kind of sort of glancing right past, is that the French are working on a singular issue, 2 years worth of retirement increase. The GOP or the alt-right or the Christo-fascists are super focused. Let's just look at 7 mountain mandates. The reduction of 31,000 versus 1,200 pages into 7 mandates. It is laser focused. 20 bills in the Blitz, Project Blitz, laser focused. And then I look at us. We're not focused. We're trying to keep up. We're trying to figure out what's what. We're trying to figure out which direction, which trajectory are we taking here. And we are definitely not focused. That's going to be our downfall.
This is the last thing I'll say on this subject, because I started it. Let me just say this last little piece. I do believe that every fascist country ever was brought down by violent revolution. Every single one. And right now, we have stagnant wages for 20 years. We have corporations buying up all our homes. We have looming climate collapse, not just climate change, climate collapse. We're in the pipeline for 10 degrees global warming right now in the next 200 years. Scientists say that we're headed for a blue ocean event within 5 to 10. By the way, a blue ocean event is where there's no ice in the Arctic for a summer, and eventually there's no ice at all, which will collapse the food production. So, I mean, we're at a point now where not only every American life is going to depend on some kind of revolution, but the entire world is going to have to. And I hear the optimism. I hear what's ideal. But I also think that without some form of violent revolution, we're not going to get out of fascism.
I'm going to just refer to Ash on this real quick.
That tells us that.
Hold on just a second. I'm going to refer to Ash on this, and this is out of the conversation that we had last time. The problem with any form of violence is that it is absolutely unpredictable, because we do not know who is, for one, armed to the teeth, for another, who is military, former military, who has connections, who is involved. It is absolutely unpredictable. So is it a last resort? Of course it is. Is it a desirable resort? Absolutely not. So I would very much steer away from that, because that could backfire in almost an instant. Shireen.
I wanted to try to know if that's okay. I'm sorry.
Annie, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Do you know the last time America bombed Americans?
Tulsa.
The Tulsa Massacre, I believe.
No.
Black Wall Street?
No.
Was it the guy in Dallas that shot the police? No, that wasn't. They just bombed him.
Okay, 3 attempts, you're out. Which one is it?
No.
It wasn't Tulsa?
It was 1985 in Philadelphia.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So the problem that we have when people say, well, we're just going to go through violence, is that there is a lack of historical narrative of how often Black people have been bombed, and how often this country has absolutely no problem bombing us when we sort of uproar. Yeah. The little bit that we've done with the 2020 to now, it's still a little bit. I was around when that one happened, right? So my grandmother lived through bombings. My great-grandparents lived through bombings. We are not understanding what's actually happening. And when I hear that, sometimes I'm always like, oh, somebody doesn't quite understand like the historical narrative. The move is called the move bombing. So please take a look and look it up. They were people who were protesting, but it was Philadelphia in the North, not even in the South, in modern day.
So go ahead.
What I'm trying to get at, though, is that I'm not saying that people should not have something in place to defend themselves and should just sit there and take it the way MLK asked us to do before. I think that there's something different happening now that we need to move that narrative along. But I also need to make sure that people understand that when someone says, well, we're about to go into violence, be clear the people who are going to be harmed the most are the most marginalized people. It's not going to be the average white people basically committing that violence, right? So that's the tricky part about this. I'm not saying that people should just lay down and just take whatever's happening. I am saying that we're missing key pieces, that this country has no problem getting mad at a group of Black people in some town off in the beaten path that they can just drop a bomb of if we go off into a town even separate from all the white people. Like, they will do it in an instance. They've always done it. What I am saying, though, there is a way that we can do this collectively so that we can work together about like what's coming. What I think is missing is the way in which we live in the spaces together. The assumption that white spaces will always be safe is also false, right? But also the assumption that Black spaces is the most violent spaces, and then like we need to sort of take up arms in those spaces. I want to make sure that like I'm not missing the point what I know you're trying to say. We have got to get to a point where we're pushing back a little bit more than we are. I see you. A little bit more, but the little bit
exactly
more includes both pushing back for our voting abilities, our protecting our school boards, protecting our children, and fighting against the laws that are being put into place. Like there are ways that we can do this, and I also think there's stages in between. I think that what was said earlier was like we're all over the place. I don't think so. I think that they are all over the place. I think if we keep the strategy in place about what we should be doing, and by the way, most of what's happening, most of what's going on is the fact that the Democrats still haven't figured out a solution to the Southern strategy. Right. Period.
Okay. I want to piggyback because it absolutely applies. I am frothing. It's an amazing question. I pose it as MC of the chat to these two beautiful ladies here. Ipo Bada, can you all talk about the specific barriers to solidarity on the left? Amazing question.
Okay,
amazing question. Chef's kiss.
Okay, so I'm in San Francisco. 40%. I mean, we have people of color all over the place, right? And yet, it's one of the most anti-Black cities that I've ever lived in. And what they're doing right now is in diverse areas, they're weaponizing people of color to fight against one another. And the way that they're doing that is they're sharing disinformation. You're seeing a lot of stories. They've basically, there's conservative movement has taken over the Stop AAPI Hate movement, and they're using it to say that Black people are responsible for the rise in Asian American hate. And they're sharing like videos of Black people beating Asian American elders. And a lot of white folks don't even know that this is happening because these are on Asian American channels. It's in WeChat and it's in Asian American like language. They're also, I'm hearing in SoCal, I'm hearing from my friends that they're also kind of weaponizing what do you call it? They're engaging with like Latinx communities. And, you know, you see it in Florida with the Cuban American communities, but also religious communities. They have weaponized propaganda that is racially coded. And I think that's why, Shireen, is what you're doing is so important. Is I think people think of disinfo as if it's just disinfo, and it only functions if it's very effective when you pair it with these kind of with racialized narratives that people don't even know that they have in their brains, right?
And so implicit biases.
And so I think people should follow like Dog Whistle. It's Ian Haney Lopez talks about dog whistle racism. You need to what are stereotypes against Asian Americans? What are stereotypes that we associate with Latin, immigrants, or Jewish folks? Like all of those narratives are being weaponized right now. And if you're not aware of them, those are the patterns that like Rob is talking about. If I see lazy Black women with all their kids and like dangerous, scary men, like attacking Asians, like these are all narratives that we have to be aware of and ask questions before we just, agree with them. And then additionally, I think that the solution is the sum of us. I don't know if you've read any of that. It's Heather McGhee wrote a book called The Sum of Us. And she really shows how when you target Black folks, it's a strategy for hurting all of us, right? And so if you want to deal with workers' rights, if you want to deal with women's rights, like abortion access, then you focus on the most marginalized folks, because those are the ones, if they're free, like we're all going to be free. So I'm always looking at and in a space like this, I'm wondering who's missing, right? Trans folks are being targeted. We shouldn't be having this conversation if we're not going to include trans voices, because I'll tell you, I'm a cis het woman and I don't see my privilege. I can walk anywhere I want, kiss my husband in public. I can dress however I want and nobody's targeting me. I use whatever bathroom I want. I don't even think about it. And so my trans friends, though, are the ones who say, hey, Allie, you did this thing and it was kind of uncool, or you didn't realize that I can't get access to this place because there's no wheelchair access. that's, I think proximity is important, and us working together is important because we help each other see things. I don't see my privilege, right? It takes work to see your privilege. It's very easy to see things
on here.
And so I think that this is a great space. I think we need to include voices of folks who are the most marginalized folks, who are the targets right now. Immigrants are targets, folks with disabilities are targets, and the trans community and Black folks are like, those are the ones that are on my list. And so you can't do the work without them. And so, I want to like fight for trans rights. I can't do that without trans people. Like, that's ridiculous, right? And so in San Francisco, I'm partnering with parents of trans kids and parents who are trans, and I'm saying, how can I support your efforts? I'm not coming up with stuff on my own. I'm saying, how can I work to support the stuff that you've already been working on? And so I think that's where we need to start.
Allie and Shireen, sorry, I'm on the bass. You guys are going to hear taps. I just want to tell you guys my background real quick. Sorry, just to kind of clear the air, I want to give you guys my background here. I'm a Jewish woman, and I had 2/3 of my family killed in the concentration camps during the Holocaust. I also have a transgender teenager, and I live in a red state that is persecuting him pretty hard right now. He can't get his hormone therapy anymore because of the Oklahoma ban on gender affirming care. I talked about violent revolution earlier, and I'm not going to get back into that, but I just want to kind of explain so that you guys don't think I'm just speaking from a place of total privilege. My grandpa told me this story. He said that...
I want to make a kind correction, especially in our current company. Our privilege supersedes, our whiteness supersedes any of our identities in this current climate.
Oh yeah, that's not what I'm saying, I promise. I'm just not as articulate as you guys, but I can explain about the violent revolution with this story, I promise. So my grandpa, when they were moved into the ghettos, his friends and his neighbors, they didn't do anything. They peacefully protested. They didn't do anything because they thought, well, it's just temporary. And my grandpa said that even when they were on the cattle cars, that there were men on the cattle car with him that were saying, we're just going there to work. Even as the people in the cattle car were dying all around them, they were saying, we're just going to work. And so for me, the rise of fascism is very terrifying because my family died from it not too long ago. So anyways, I'm not saying that I support an overthrowing of the government or anything because I'm white. I'm just saying I'm scared. I'm speaking from a place of fear because my family didn't do it and it took their lives.
I would, again, I'm offering a kind course correction. Don't let it come from a place of fear. Let it come from a place of love for your fellow man, woman, trans, LGBTQ. If it comes from fear, you're going to default to reactionary. You're going to default to anger. And white woman to white woman, like that can go so bad for the people we're trying to fight for. And if we re-gear it, and it is Black women on this app that taught me this lesson, to let that activism come from a place of love, not from, I want to be on the right side of history or a moral grandstanding, but from a place of love. Let love fuel your activism, and you'll be more likely to be more open to other voices and other experiences and seeing a little bit more truth through that love and compassion, if that makes sense.
I wanted to hear from
Shireen.
If
I'm wrong.
So Annie, I want to take in what you said. Really, I know why this happens, and I think we're in a room full of people who kind of are coming from the same sort of sentiment and fear. I think it's really important to acknowledge it, but I also want you to understand it from our perspective, right? My grandfather went to fight to protect your people. He didn't stay in America, right? But while he was fighting as an American soldier, he was still treated less than, even though he was in a country that didn't know what Jim Crow was. I can't go into the details of all the things that happened to him, but when he defended himself, he was put in jail. And then he had to come back to this country after the war was over and live through Jim Crow. He was not granted the GI Bill like everybody else was. There were laws still in place that targeted him as a complete identity and his whole entire family. He was not able to buy property or land. He ended up dying with PTSD that could not get connected to the record for the VA. And I took care of him. Literally, his death day was yesterday. 5 years ago, I took care of him, and he died yesterday in 2008 when Obama was about to become president. And the only little bit of energy I could get out of him was him looking up, perceiving that there was a possible Black president that could possibly exist in this country. So it's not that I don't want to dismiss what you're saying. I'm telling you, I'm hearing you. I know exactly what you're saying. But what I'm also trying to say that he is my grandfather, yet he comes from the whole horrible history of this country all the way up to me. And I had to live through an insurrection. My ancestors lived through an insurrection in 1898. I'm a descendant of an insurrection where Black people, Black politicians were murdered. Not just the Tulsa towns, that every time Black people politically make a decision, white people show up in violence. January.
Ooh. That was weird.
Shireen?
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Yes.
No?
I can.
Okay.
I can.
I saw me glitch. I saw me glitch. I'm sorry.
I saw the glitch too. That got weird for a second.
Okay. So from my perspective, coming from the stories of my family, I am witnessing another insurrection because Black people chose a president.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
White violence is what I witnessed, and it's still happening.
Shireen, I have a question for you. Hearing your perspectives, let me offer another solution that I have in mind. Part of it is mutual aid. We definitely need strong intersectional mutual aid. But another thing I want to suggest.
Ooh.
There was a short-lived session.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to get Gen Z and millennials out in droves at the local level. It's the school boards, mayor, city council, to vote for actual progressives, because we don't actually have a far left in our country. We don't have progressive. Democrats in our country and many other countries would be considered conservative. I feel like if we don't have a violent revolution, that the only other option is to form really well-structured mutual aid groups and to really focus on getting people out to vote locally so that we can get real left progressives in office that eventually can run for Congress and Senate.
Can I jump in on that? Because I was actually in a position, and because I ran as just a public servant, and because I'm a mom, and the people that were running, I found out a woman who was running was a transphobe, and she was also anti-Black, and I was like, she can't be on the school board. So I ran, and I've been targeted for the last 2 years. People targeted my husband. They talk about where my kids go to school. If you look at my Wikipedia, it's like longer than Biden's Wikipedia. They called in fake violations on my house so that they could write about me in the San Francisco Chronicle. When I tried to sell my house, they started talking about the house sale, and they started saying maybe we should show up. Like, I've been targeted financially. They want to eradicate my family. And it's been 2 years of this in San Francisco, which is a progressive city. My colleague, Gabriela Lopez, they said they wanted to grape her. They said we were constantly getting death threats. Like, anybody who stood up for us was also targeted. I had friends who commented on my Facebook feed, and then they were calling me and saying, please delete my comment, because I got a call from my boss saying, like, why am I supporting, like you? And they're doing this with people across the country. It's not just me. I was very visible, but I have friends in North Virginia that are just parents, and they are terrorizing them. And so we can't expect people would ask me, well, who else can run me and my friend Gabriella are like, I'm not telling anybody to run. And I am definitely not telling any Black women to run, or anybody who's marginalized in any way, shape, or form, because nobody's protecting us. Even progressives, they're all just ducking and covering. All these liberals, who just don't want to have conflict. And so what we need to focus on is building support and protection for people who we want to take these roles. I talked to a doctor at Arizona State University. She's studying these attacks on school boards. And she said suburban Arizona, there's single Black moms who were serving, basically said, I can't do this because, when I was getting targeted, I called the police and they were like, well, what do you want me to do about it? There is no protection whatsoever. And you've got folks like, literally, people were targeting me with Andy No. They were calling in Andy No to target parents in my city. Right. And so they were saying, hey, like my friend, Emily's like, I support Allie. And then somebody's like, oh, hey, Andy, maybe you should talk to Emily. Like, people were getting threatened and targeted and doxxed, and their kids were. Any parent who has trans kids now can't speak up in San Francisco because Chris Rufo will put him on the Twitter feed. Twitter is like a hit list right now. And if you look at Chris Rufo's feed, he's targeting ethnic studies educators in Washington. They're using it as a hit list. And so, like, I'm just wondering, when are people going to protect folks that are trying to do the good work? If y'all care so much about it, why aren't you showing up? And like, when the Proud Boys are coming down and, to Orange County, and they're showing up at the school board, like, with their pitchforks, and a lot of them aren't even parents, and they have their skull masks, and you have just a whole bunch of parents there feeling really vulnerable. When are folks going to show up and call them out? And so I know some folks down in SoCal who are doing that. These are anti-fascist parents, and they're showing up and they're organizing with veterans associations to provide protection for people, and they're speaking up and they're identifying folks, and saying, hey, this guy's doing these things, and calling it out, not in a violent way, but standing up for stuff. And so I don't think there's a binary between like violent revolution and like not doing anything. The middle is showing up and standing up and speaking up in collective unity, because if you're one person, they can pick you off. But if you show up as a group, then there's protection. And what I found is when I spoke up, a whole bunch of people were just like, oh, we're just gonna, hide under a rock. And then I told them, like, the supremacists are coming after all of us, but they're going to start with the easy folks. So they're starting with trans folks and Black folks, but they're just going to keep moving on up, and now they're going after librarians. And then eventually they're going to go after people in the private sector, right?
Allie, you're 100% right. 100%. I'm not going to take all your time. I just want to stick with
sorry.
I started this church called the Church of Prismatic Light, and I did it to protect trans kids. And then I started having people duet my videos loading shotguns. They went on my child's page. They said that they're going to make him swallow a shotgun. I had several people start following me around in their cars in real life. And while that organization is still going, I'm no longer a part of it. So you have no judgment for me. I get it. We need, the first thing we need is a strong structure of mutual aid and protection in place.
Yeah. And so that I want to say I am working on those things, but we can't. I'm used to organizing in public. I'm used to transparency, all that stuff. It is not safe right now. In Temecula, the kids that were organizing walkouts against the CRT thing, they are being targeted. And so I called them when it first happened, and I said, I want you to know that you guys need to be safe. And they were like, we're going to speak our truth. And I was like, I support that, but it's a different world right now. And so I think people need to understand that a lot of the organizing that we do, we need to talk about our values and things like that, but we need to do a lot of the organizing work. We need to do it in a way that protects vulnerable people and vulnerable communities. And that means being very selective about who we network with and who we share information with, and building strong communication networks so we can share that information, but not publicly, in ways that like are private, and that we can like then take action in collective ways.
Allie, how do we do that with TikTok being banned and Section 230 about to be repealed, which is going to limit our speech?
Well, okay, so I'm not going to agree that that's going to happen, and I want Shireen to talk about that, but I'm organizing groups on Signal, so I'm connecting with folks and setting up small chat rooms where we can share information via Signal. That's been a really effective strategy. I also have friends who are trying to figure out ways to set up our own platforms where they can like share information, and it's not owned by any of the major media companies. So as we start to develop those things within my network, if it works, then I'll be sharing kind of those spaces. They're like website. People are building websites so that we can share information about like who's showing up at school board meetings and, you know, things like that, so that we can share information internally and not have it be public.
Okay, really quickly. TikTok is not going to be banned anytime soon. Just FYI. I know what you saw at the hearing. No, seriously. I watched the hearing and I went through all the little details of the things that they were trying to clamor about. There's nothing.
It's still in committee, right? It's still just in committee.
I'm sorry. You have to go through both. One is going to say yes and the other is not. Y'all don't even this is what I mean about people not understand how it actually works. You cannot get a bill passed if both the House and the Senate won't say yes. And I promise you, we're not getting that even close to that. It's still in the actual subcommittee, and the subcommittee, I don't even want to go into details about what the differences are between committee, subcommittee, and the spaces in between. If it ever happens, you got at least 2 years, and we get through 2024. FYI, prepare to keep making sure what needs to happen on here to get people out to vote and to manage through these things. It ain't happening before 2024. Don't get me wrong. The platforms allowing Agent Orange 45 back on is going to turn this whole thing in a whole different freaking way. But that's not going to change the concept that is hypocritical about free speech in certain ways and how data is used in certain ways, whether it's foreign or domestic. The data gets used the exact same way, but we only care about it when it's foreign. When our American companies are doing it, we throw our hands up. So,
however,
go ahead.
It's done one thing that is the unintended consequence. It has brought 150 million people that use this app closer together. And that's the momentum that I do not believe we can sacrifice, lose, negatively impact, or even remotely reduce to a degree that we say, well, it's not going to be actual that we're banning TikTok before 2024, 5, 6, what have you. That's, from a legal perspective, quite right. But that would also reduce our momentum that we have right now. So right now, the rage, the fire, the fuel, the disappointment, the anger that we collectively are experiencing, because this is a communal app. Mm-hmm. That is the power that we need to harness right now.
I agree.
And if we lose that drive, then 2024 is going to go down the shitter. It's that simple.
We have an amazing audience question. This is from Yoda Unicorn, and it is, how do people outside of the USA help? Because we as Americans have been helping other countries. How can non-Americans or Americans not on the soil, how can they help us in this current climate? What resources do they have?
As the resident European, I might have something to say about that. depending on where you are in Europe, I would presume, or hopefully, that you are in Europe, or at least in a country that still values education to some degree. Use your power to educate. This platform particularly has the function of a short form classroom. You can bring your education, you can bring awareness to things that Americans commonly don't see, because number one, education has been whitewashed, and we are right back to it. And the Holocaust, of course, needs to be a topic. There needs to be a whole lot more education. If we lose TikTok, we lose the many, or the few rather, Holocaust survivors that are on this app. They're being silenced. Mm-hmm. We can't go there. We've done that once. Doing it again is just it's unimaginable. Yeah. So from a foreign perspective, educate. From the city tours to history, just use that power that you have, because Europeans, Asians, of course, down in the southern hemisphere, if you will, Australia and whatnot, education still has value. It is still being practiced. It still has a level of integrity. Bring that out. Bring this to the app. That would be my appeal.
Relaying like some of those shared experiences, because a lot of the countries have experienced the things that we are going through, the phases of history that we are like currently in and been experiencing in other places. So sharing those shared experiences like with other people like us, and helping us recognize, going back to patterns, seem to be on a roll tonight with patterns, helping us recognize that those patterns that other people have experienced. It's a lot more powerful whenever you're hearing stories from people and not reading in a textbook.
Mm-hmm. Can I chime in? I want to piggyback on that. That's part of the reason why I wanted to do the podcast, is that we kept telling people what was happening in San Francisco, and everyone, it's like hard to see stuff that's like in your own backyard. And so I was, and then I have friends in Northern Virginia, and they were having the same problem. So I started thinking, I want to start a podcast because I want to get voices like Shireen's. I interviewed her for the podcast. I'm not an expert on this, but we need to amplify more voices, and we need to get folks on the ground sharing strategies. We need to have people from different perspectives, because sometimes it might resonate more for one person to say the same thing as somebody else. And so by getting sometimes it resonates if I hear a mom say something, or it resonates if it's like a professor, or, and some of us, like data, I was thinking even of all of us as creators, we share information in different ways, and we're all trying to tackle similar issues, but the way we approach it might be differently. And we might have some of the same audience, but we might have some differences. And so I think amplifying, sharing, like all of each, I like to share other folks and amplify other folks, but I'm trying to also do that with the podcast. And I think as much as we can lift up other voices and show examples of people who are doing the work, they want us to lose hope. They want us to think that like nobody out there thinks like we do. There are tons of people who are seeing what's going on and they're feeling like hopeless. There's tons of people fighting this. And so we need to push back on those narratives that make people feel apathetic and say there's like kids organizing in Temecula to fight back. Like that is an inspiring story. There are parents in northern upstate New York that are organizing defense of democracy. So that's a shout out. Red, Wine, and Blue is another organization of suburban moms who are trying to get people organized. There's another friend of mine, Lucia, who's a Latina educator. She started Fight Back Collective. There's a lot of people trying to push back on this. And so we need to amplify each other's voices. And I want to say shout out, thank you for this space. Like just even creating this space is a part of that answer, creating space for folks, more than just one voice, right? So props to this collective of folks, and props to you for setting up the space for us.
Allie, I have a question for you before you go. When I was doing the prismatic light stuff, it was so hard to organize it intersectionally because my audience started with me being a prepper. So I had a lot of white followers that followed me over into the organization. And then everybody was like, well, why don't you have a Black trans person on your board? I'm like, well, they haven't come forward. But what you need money because you need outreach. So here's my question for you, Allie. How do we fund these organizations? Like, who would be the best people to donate to our time, our money? And if we started an organization or a local community mutual aid, what's the best way to fund that?
I don't know, because I know, like, okay, I'm trying to provide support. I provide a lot of support for people who reach out to me. And so I'm creating spaces for people who are being targeted. I know what it's like to be targeted. So I'm trying to create spaces for them. And so people are contributing via Patreon. If you want to support my work and help me do that, then that's something, that on a really small basis you can do. Defense of Democracy, I know they are actively looking for support and money. You can donate to organizations like that are currently like trying to raise money. I think we should be putting pressure on Democrats, because ultimately they're going to lose their shirts if they don't, start dealing with this stuff. And I think we need to put pressure on Democratic leadership to start investing in organizations that are doing more of this kind of communications work and amplifying, creators and content creators that can, talk about this in ways that are easy and understandable for most Americans.
Okay. Over to Ginge, then we'll run a closing round with one final question, and then we'll wrap this. We are way over before we come back next Friday. And of course, Shireen, I'm going to have to just tie you to me and drag you right back in here next Friday. just to make sure that we understand each other on this. So audience idea, Ginge, and then we'll have one closing question for everyone.
Yes. And I want to bring it up because it's a great idea. It was actually one of our fucking cats. Man, that just derails my whole brain. Anyway, Can We Do Better Place, one of our comms mods, said concerts. Up here in the Seattle-Tacoma area, we actually have canvassers that show up at concerts. Annie, and the Oklahoma music scene has been booming. So if you can find grassroots organizations that do petitions and things for human rights, because we have those, they show up at our concerts in Seattle. They are more than welcome. And actually some of the local radio stations like KEXP actually help to sponsor those movements as well. They'll do like a dollar matching thing. So for those first and foremost, and I'm sure the Allie and Digital are going to back me up on this, look for your grassroots, BIPOC-led, trans-led groups, and they will point you in the right direction. If not, that is a safe initiative to take, is become a petition initiative, become a awareness initiative, and bomb those concerts and get groups, because people with a little booze are really, really, really willing to give you their time.
Celtic, Annie, or Allie, and Shireen, I'm about to have to go, but before I do, please follow me back so we can stay in touch, because I want to tell you guys, I love
Annie. I've been forever.
I love that you guys challenged me tonight. I think that there's a lot of people when they say something and then somebody comes along and they say, no, you need to re-educate yourself. You need to learn more. They would get offended by that. I don't. You guys have inspired me to go do some reading, to learn about the Philly bombing. And I would just love if we could stay in touch, because I absolutely appreciate hearing your perspectives and growing as a person thanks to your knowledge.
Well, I appreciate you too, and want to connect you as well as a parent who's of a trans kid as well. We've got a lot of common stuff, and I can share stuff that we're doing in San Francisco to support trans kids and trans parents. So,
all right, let's bring it home. Speed rounds. Everybody gets 1 minute. One item that you want the audience to do, and how can they do that? One item that is particularly important to you. Whatever
I'll go
it may be.
As representative of the audience.
You got it. 60 seconds. Whoever wants to start, hop in it and just share away. One thing to do, one actionable item, and how to do it.
I got one.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Allie.
No, Rob, you go.
Go ahead.
Okay. Ishmael Reed is a legendary playwright, wrote a play about my trauma in SF. And he saw the BS in the right-wing media, and he wrote a play about it. And it's streaming live from New York, Saturday night at 5 p.m. and Sunday at noon Pacific time. Eastern time, it's 8 p.m. Saturday night and 3 o'clock if you see it, it's a really great opportunity. He basically talks about this idea of a Eurocentric education and this indoctrination that's happening in our country. And he also gets into the whole idea of using Asian Americans to maintain white supremacy, and that they're kind of this idea of whiteness, and that our country has then brought white in new groups to create, like Irish folks were not considered white, and then now they are. And so it's a very good, it's a good play to see, to get your brain thinking about different things.
Rob, take it away.
So I've been having a lot of conversations with various groups about Seven Mountains, like specifically over the last, few weeks. I got another one coming up tomorrow. That could open atheists going to a church. That's going to be fun. But it welcome me in. But I've been closing with like this and all of this because people are always asking, what can we do about this? And I believe that the solution is actually really, really simple. We have to stop giving up the battlefield. And that's what we're doing. Because so much of these attacks on marginalized communities, the legislation, the resolutions, the problems that are going on with school boards, they're happening in local elections. Local elections have turnout that's dismal. Colorado Springs is electing their city council and mayors like right now. 2021 elections had a 27% turnout in a city that's around 500,000 people. We're giving it up. We are giving up. We're opening the doors and allowing the extremists to come in and take over these local organizations, local government organizations. There's a reason why Steve Bannon was telling everybody that the next place where they need to move was school boards and city councils, because we've made it easy for them for decades. It's very, very simple. See if we'd actually turn out to vote, even if we turn out to vote at midterm election levels, we probably would not be having this conversation right now, because there would have been no space for them to move into. It's really, really simple, especially in states like Colorado, especially in states like Washington that have mail-in voting. There is no excuse to not return your ballot, your ballot. Go to the polls and vote, and we would not have to have this conversation anymore, and we could talk about horror movies and metal instead.
Agreed. Shireen or Annie, who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Shireen, you got it? All right, jump on in.
I'm going to simplify what Rob said. And I really need to simplify this to the basic level. If you hear parents' rights, you are hearing the Daughters of the Confederacy cheerleaders and Moms of Liberty. You are not hearing parents from marginalized groups, and you are allowing a group of parents to define what parenting means for you in your household. You know what else I think? If you are okay with that, then what kind of parent are you? Because no parent should have the right to tell another parent how to raise their child. And I really am going to say this sincerely, because I know that I'm going to rattle a couple of feelings. But moms who target other children from pattern matching are not actual mothers. There's something else.
Yeah.
And check that. Check it when it happens. Check it all the time, and protect every child in your neighborhood, in your school, and across this country.
You're being requested to say that again, please. Say it again.
I don't know how to say it again.
Say it again.
Annie,
I don't know how to say it again. I meant what I said. I mean, mom, like seriously. If you're calling yourself a mom and you're targeting other children, you are no mother to me, for sure. And no one should consider you a parent if you think you have the right to quote unquote protect your child and target other children. That's not parenting, and that's not motherhood. That's not mothering in any form. Protect every child. You don't need to pattern match to do that.
rights.
All right, let's hand it off. Annie, go ahead.
That was
Okay.
hot.
We can sit on every podcast and every group chat, and we can talk about the smorgasbord of hateful legislation that's going on in this country. But if we don't know who is behind it, we are never going to be able to organize effectively against it. And so I am going to encourage everyone listening here to pick up a book called Shadow Network by Ann Nelson. Once again, that is Shadow Network by Ann Nelson. You can get it on Kindle, you can get hardback, you can get it on Audible. She exposes the Council for National Policy. And that is who you need to know, along with the Heritage Foundation, American Legislative Exchange Council, and the Alliance Defending Freedom. But you need to know who your enemy is to have an effective chance of beating them. That's it.
That was it? You kept it at like 50
Homework.
seconds. I'm not even sure what to say.
Shadow Network.
Does anybody want to, actually, Shireen, can I pop it back to you? We did have that one audience question that's been coming up several times, pattern matching.
Pattern matching.
Oh, pattern matching.
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah. I don't look at a white child as being harmed and think that I'm not going to protect that child. You should never look at a child, no matter what their identities are, what their skin color is, or anything in between, and decide that the only child you're going to protect is the one that looks like you, the one that matches your family, the one that matches your identity, the one that somehow, in the mix of a whole sea, is the one you're going to pick to save and protect. Ignore the rest. Pattern matching means that your unconscious bias makes you look at specific children one way versus children in another. If you are a parent, you look at all children, you try to protect them all in any setting and any moment. At school, in the playground, across the street with your neighbor. There is a really unfortunate thing America does about this whole individualism thing, and it's being inflicted upon not only adults, but being assumed that children should do it too, that they are not supposed to look at other children and see them as children like them because of some form of their identity that does not match them. Pattern matching means that no matter what a child looks like at 6 years old, they are a child and they deserve to be protected. They deserve to be seen as a child.
Thank you.
And if you can't do that, you are not a parent.
Agreed.
Period.
Thanks for clarifying that. That was one of the questions that rolled through. Gingy, you're not getting out of this. One thing.
Okay.
One action item.
Okay.
Lay it on us.
I'm going to take what?
60 seconds.
All right. So I'm going to stand up for this. All right. What she said, if it is a child, it is a child. We keep hearing creators like Portia Noir and many, many others say, if you stand for one in your allyship, you stand for all. And that is a lesson toward intersectionality. That is a lesson on all, a rising tide lifting all boats. And I'm just going to hammer this point home again, because I always do. Take breaks as you need to. Do not think that there are not other soldiers in this fight with you that can pick it up while you rest. And on that note, I also want to say a huge thank you on behalf of that fucking chat. You guys have been amazing. The positivity, the interaction that chat has had me working, babes. Thank you guys so much. To our mods, like, to Watchbar, to our comms mods who have dipped in and out, to the wonderful guests we've had in that chat, like Unicorn Misanthrope. You guys have been wonderful. You've been keeping me busy, and I have so many freaking notes here. So thank you guys. It's been wonderful.
All right. I'm just going to close this out real quick.
Hit up those Cash Apps on these people. Cash Apps, people. Show your love through Cash Apps.
Good idea. I think my one action item is the one that I think tags on to Rob a little bit, in a sense that we have a sense of complacency when it comes to politics. And it is that complacency right now that if we are not escaping from that mechanism, we're going to lose what's dear to us. And not everybody is interested in politics. I get that. Not everybody wants to spend time on researching candidates or potentially supporting somebody or running for office themselves. But there is a point when we have to endure some level of boredom, if you will, and doing something that is perhaps uncomfortable and not necessarily interesting to us to ensure that we have a positive tomorrow. That would be my one call to action right now, is just when we are done here today, tomorrow, what have you, sit down, look who's at the school boards, at the library level, at your city council, find out who they are, find out what they stand for, familiarize yourself with who's in the arena. The only way to get through this is through education, and it starts with the self. That would be my one call to action for now. Then we can come back and talk about how we all come together and share that knowledge and be inclusive about it. That's it. Thanks so much, Shireen. You're amazing. Annie, of course, you're a rock star. Rob, thank you, sir. We'll do this again next week. The mods have kept us safe as always. You guys are phenomenal. Ginge has found a new occupation as the mod, if you will, for all the questions. I think that format has worked really well. We're going to do this again next week as well. So same time, same station, if you will. It will be 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, and 6 p.m. on the Pacific side of the country. Until then, guys, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.
I so appreciate it.
Thank
Love you guys.
Love you.